Well, good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and start our study session. Hope everybody's having a great morning visiting, and we call it networking this morning. Welcome to our Mesa City Council study session for January 15th, 2026. All council members are present. With that, we're going to start with item 1A, is a presentation on proposed programs and funding options to support redevelopment priorities and initiatives. That's going to be by Jeff and Jeff, okay, Angelica and Jay and Nana, as needed.
We got a team.
Probably Jeff, you're starting it out. McVeigh or Robin?
Yes, sir, Mayor. Mayor, Council, good morning. Jeff McVeigh, Manager of Urban Transformation. For the past 2 years, Council has identified redevelopment as a key strategic priority of the city. During that time, the core team that's represented here today, led by Mr. Robbins and supported by Nana and Jay and their teams, I want to specifically recognize Amanda Elliott, Rachel Phillips, and Madison Cox for the hard work that they do to support us in this effort. But we have been working diligently for the past couple of years and are pleased to be able to come to you and present preliminary recommendations for a redevelopment toolkit. That not only have we been working with this core team and the staff supporting us, but this has been an effort that's been across the entire city. We've worked with almost every department in the city because the redevelopment crosses every boundary that we work with. Go ahead. Before we get into the actual redevelopment program, we kind of want to remind the council and set the stage. We say it often, but we live and work in a regulatory environment that provides limited economic development and redevelopment tools that are available. So what we've done over the course of the past year is we've gone and we've looked at best practices across the state, across the nation, and we threw all these ideas into a hopper. Go ahead into the next one. And as we presented back in June 2025, we gave you a sense of the framework in which we were going to look. So with all those tools into the hopper, we then started looking at the potential tools. We created a short list based off of what are feasible, what meets our city's unique needs, and which will have, we believe, the greatest impact for affecting the redevelopment. Once we had that short list, then we put it into the next layer of review, and we started building them out. Using engineering design terms, we built them out to a 30% level. That gave us the ability to review them against legal and budgetary considerations, so that what we're going to present today, we feel very confident that with council's direction to move forward, that we can take these to the full development and be able to come back to council with fully baked toolkits that are budgetarily and legally realistic to implement in the city. But before we go on to present our actual recommendations on the redevelopment programs, we do want to talk a little bit about why. What is the reason why we think redevelopment and creating this program is important? Mr. Robbins.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, it's great to be with you today. We have looked across the United States and looked at many of the case studies, and we have a lot of history to look back on of the rise and fall of some of the great cities. And when we examine those case studies, there are clear patterns that stand out about why, whether it's an entire city or a part of the city, goes into decline and why it is revitalized. And one thing that we often see in these case studies is that there's an economic shock that happens, an industry moves out, or sometimes it's just steady, slow decline without any type of intervention. And without any type of intervention, it will slowly slip into a state of what we call disinvestment. And we use the term sometimes slum and blight to talk about disinvestment. You can think of those as being synonymous terms, but slum and blight is when we have a condition where deteriorated or underperforming properties negatively affect safety, health, quality of life, and the economic vitality of an area. And the problem is that when communities start slipping into this stage, it creates a negative reinforcing cycle that just gets worse and worse until there's an intervention. And that's what we're here to talk with you about today. Whether it's from the private sector, the public sector, or often a combination of the two, cities can make tactical interventions to mitigate the decline of communities and then to make interventions to pull communities out of deep disinvestment. Another thing that we see in the national case studies when cities don't engage is that they are accepting a cost, but they're accepting it in a different place. So we see that distressed properties, they create an impact on the public finances. We see that through code compliance, legal processes. These are hearings, liens, inspections. All of that takes staff time. This can also be seen, especially with vacant properties where we have a higher calls for fire, for police service, and then directly there is an impact to the tax base in lower assessed values, lost sales tax revenues, taxes that are delinquent, and generally that area then becomes harder to market. We'll say this maybe a few times in the presentation, but when we look at decline and disinvestment, it doesn't stay in a neat little box. It tends to spread. And so it's important to make early strategic investments to curb that. One of the examples where we see public burden that is beginning to emerge and to have an impact on our finances is out on Power Road. And we'll have Angelica speak to this particular situation.
I failed to mention at the beginning, Angelica Guevara, our co-compliance. You can't do redevelopment without having co-compliance in hand with this process. So we'll be playing a little bit of musical chairs during this presentation since there's so many of us, but welcome, Angelica.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So we have a slide here in front of you with some information about a property that has been challenging for our office and for our city. It's the Indy Car Wash. It's also was previously a gas station, a retail store, and then I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of the site and the challenges there. Unfortunately, it did close back in 2017. We have had numerous inspections on the property, numerous ongoing complaints about the status of the property. We have a property owner who is out of state, who we have issued multiple citations to. We've issued criminal charges, but because they are out of state, we don't extradite for those types of charges. But we continue to have issues with lack of maintenance on the property, with trespassing, graffiti, dumping, squatters. You can see in the photographs the current state of the property. We continue to spend money on this property. We did an abatement program several years ago after there was a fire at the property, and we ended up boarding up the building, and then ended up fencing up the property. To date, our costs exceed over $30,000, and we anticipate this is going to continue to be an ongoing expense for the city. And so we continue to have that public financial burden, even on this property, where we have a property owner who indicates a willingness to fix it and reopen it, but they've been in the permit process for over 2 years, and it's not for a lack of staff not trying to work with them. They file an application, and then they just don't proceed with a resubmittal and complete their permit approvals. So this is a challenging property for us.
Mayor, I have a question.
Mr. Adams, then Vice Mayor.
Oh, Vice Mayor can go.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Might be the same question.
I'm curious on the criminal citations. Are these misdemeanors or are these felonies?
These are misdemeanors.
Okay, I understand why we don't extradite. I would say if they were felonies, I'd go ahead and extradite them because that would get somebody's attention really fast.
Do we not have a process of condemnation?
Councilmember Summers, one of the options that we started going down, one of the roads, using all of the tools available to us, is as part of the abatement program, we have been sending invoices to the property owner for the expenses that we have incurred. The property owner has paid some of those expenses, but in about the last 6 to 9 months, we have not received any additional funds from the property owner, so we started liening the property. We had a discussion with our city attorney's office about 2 weeks ago, and the next step is for us to look at the possibility of foreclosure on those liens, so we are exploring that option.
Okay, so we're heading down that path.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So Mayor Council, we're about to jump into the portion of the presentation where we go through the different tools. But before we do, you're going to see some icons that are on each of the tool slides. And I want to walk through what these mean. So as the core team, as we met and discussed what the right strategy was for our city and our unique needs, we began to coalesce around 3 stakeholder groups that we wanted and felt that were very important to support in order to truly have effective, comprehensive redevelopment. And that is small businesses, which is our blue icon, property owners, our red icon, and then developers, which is our orange. And so these tools, they are intended for different groups, but we have something for everybody, because when we lift one of these stakeholder groups, there's a positive reinforcement that lifts all of them. And we think that that is the ticket for what's going to work and truly elevate Mesa. So we'll move into our tools. In redevelopment, we do think in terms of incentives, but often one of the most powerful things that we can do is just to have great information. And one way to do that is to understand where we have vacant properties and to understand why they are vacant. So I'm going to hand this back to Angelica to talk about how vacant property registration can assist us in the important component of code compliance.
Thank you, Jeff. So yes, one of the tools that we are proposing is to establish a vacant property registration process. What this would do, it would allow property owners to proactively register their properties. What that does for us is allow us to have the information as to who they want us to contact for any maintenance concerns or issues that that are brought to our attention. It'll allow us to get a hold of somebody a lot faster to be able to notify them when there is an issue at their property. In addition to that, we'd be able to share that information with the staff in the police department, who also often responds to calls for service at vacant properties. But we really see this tool as helping us reduce the administrative burden of trying to track people down. And it would also support Mesa's trespass enforcement program, and it would just really help us work with the redevelopment office, because one of the tools that they'd be able to do along with this is be able to reach out to property owners to find out why their property is vacant, if they have a tenant that is that they're working with to occupy the building. But if they don't, then either the redevelopment office or economic development office can help this property owner find a tenant for their property.
Ms.
So
Forth.
the majority of the reasons help us as the city. So you named a couple, but why would a business owner want to do this, want to register? I mean, what are the advantages to them, right? Because that's going to be that's going to be the challenge, right? Is getting people to want to register. And I think you're going to get some pushback unless you have a really compelling reason as to why they should come to the city and do that.
So,
I
Mayor.
can jump in there quick too, Angelica.
Go ahead.
So, Councilmember Goforth, one of the things that we did with all these tools is that we did extensive interviews and research with comparative cities, and there's 3 cities that we look deeply to in Arizona that have this program. One of them is Phoenix. We sat down with their team. We talked with them about. Because we had the same questions: is how does this work? Is it effective? Does anybody sign up? And they're having pretty good success with this. And to your point, one of the reasons why this is good for business owners is that they ask the property owners, why is your property vacant? What's your intent with it? And so if they say, oh, well, I'd like to get this thing filled, I'm just struggling because of X, Y, Z, or we'll get to a little later in the presentation, maybe there is some component of the property that's just, they don't have the funding to fix up, and it's just this one piece that would unlock the property. Well, now their economic development team or whoever that may be gets a referral and says, okay, we now have a property. We know that they want to work with us. We've got the relationship. And as their teams are doing business retention and expansion around the city, and they're meeting different businesses that are looking for spaces to expand or to locate in their city, they now have this great property, they understand it, and they're able to make connections. And so that's great. The property owner, if their intent is to fill it as soon as possible, they're getting these great referrals from the city. Now, we don't step into those negotiations, that's not our role, but by making those introductions and connecting people, that can lead to them being able to then lease up their property. If it's a code enforcement issue that's preventing them from doing it, they can work to resolve that. But it's about getting rid of the barriers to unlock the property for private use again.
And I think this is great, and I'm not, and I think but I want to understand as we go along, what's in it for us, because now we've just become their broker, right? We're providing public brokerage services a little bit. I'm not necessarily saying I disagree, and I'd like to hear the rest of the presentation, but I certainly hope in this exchange, the city, other than just we clean up blight, we really get something in exchange for the help we're providing, these property owners that should be doing that anyway. Just not to go dark at the beginning, but that just is a thought, so.
Too late.
We have another question. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. So I did think of one thing. Have you worked with any, you said you've called surrounding cities. Have you worked with any cities in these conversations that have had a lot of properties that are registered under multiple LLCs? So, this LLC owns this one and this is the one that bought the property, and how do they track down a person? Other than, the county assessor's site is not going to be very helpful in that instance, or they're bought under trusts, or the trusts own the LLC and the LLC bought the property. What does that look like?
So, Councilmember Taylor, we often encounter that in code compliance. When we're looking for a property owner, we start out with the county assessor's records. We also have access to utility records that oftentimes is very helpful. But when we do have an LLC, we do end up doing a lot of research with the Arizona Corporation Commission to find the statutory agent. Unfortunately, there are those circumstances where an LLC has another LLC as their stat agent. And when those LLCs are registered in the state of Wyoming or other states where they're not required to provide as much public information, it is a challenge for us. One of the tools that we're starting to work with in our office recently, just as of this month, is contacting a title company to request a title search. It is costly and it is expensive for us, but it's another tool that we're starting to use to explore to see if that will allow us to find who the responsible party is of a specific property.
Thank you.
Ms. Duff.
Yes, and thank you for your work, Jeff. I've worked with him on a few projects in which there's a problem in developing or using a property, and he's looking at it from all angles and sometimes making introductions, and things unlock. So the idea of using these tools is to prosper an area, economic lifting up our area. It's not a matter of enforcement. Of course, we have enforcement, but as we know, enforcement on its own, it's limited, and it is not really unlocking the barriers. I don't want to talk about this particular one on Power Road, but on a lot of other properties, is just there's something they can't work through and they get distracted. And talking to Jeff has been able to unlock it to move forward. And then one improvement leads to another and another. So these are tools to really help us lift our city. I follow a social thing called Revitalize or Die. And the whole premise of this, the writings of it are like all these little things of just cleaning and picking up and the code and doing these things to show pride and love of the city is what turns things around. It doesn't have to be huge. It's these little lifts are turning block by block. But when you leave them and they just, on top of one problem brings to another, and before you know it, you lose sections of your city. But anyway, going back to my question, is there a timeline for vacant, after it's vacant? 90 days, 180, what kind of registration? Because turnover, there is a natural turnover from a tenant leaving and the next one coming in. And we don't want to get into that because that's kind of a natural course.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, I believe Phoenix's is 30 days, but I'm going to lead with a caveat maybe we should have had right at the first slide. We do have the kind of the 30% design that Mr. McVeigh said. And so part of our purpose today is to get an indication from you if we're heading in the right direction, if you want us to advance these tools. And then we'll go in. And so when we come back to you, that input, your thoughts on this, that's very helpful for us. But we will come back to council with a, we'll call it a 90, using engineering terms again, about 90% design. And then we'll be able to flesh out those details and talk about, how are they notified? How much time do they have? Other cities, they do have different fines if there is not compliance. We can talk about that's appropriate for Mesa or not. Our situation's going to be different. But in terms of what ours looks like yet, I don't have all those details. But I think to your question, I believe it's 30 days to reduce that natural transition time, and we're not getting people having to register their properties when they know they've got a tenant going in. We're really looking at properties that have an issue that's preventing the private sector from working normally and where an intervention may be required. That's our goal.
Let's hear the rest of the presentation. Probably covers some of our questions too.
One of the additional tools that we are proposing here today is a code compliance assistance program. What this program would allow us to do is to work with small business owners and property owners to provide assistance for publicly visible code compliance issues. What I envision is, based on what we're experiencing, is we'll notify a property owner and a business owner of a violation on the property with things that are big ticket items like their pavement. Their pavement starts having potholes, it needs maintenance, it needs to be milled and resurfaced. That's a big ticket item. And so notifying a property owner that they have this violation on their property, typical process gives them 14 days to respond. We understand that that is not something that is going to be resolved in 14 days. So what we do is we make contact with the responsible party, have a conversation with them about, we understand this is a big ticket item, we understand it's going to take time, and we work with them. Oftentimes we'll give them a 1 month to 3 month extension just to start to show progress. What we anticipate within that 1 to 3 months is that they've reached out to different contractors to get estimates on what it's going to cost so that they realistically know what type of financial burden they're going to have. And then from there, we continue to work with them to provide extensions to allow them to slowly start having the funds available to come into compliance. But to be honest with you, that is a big burden on a small business owner. So that's just one example, but that is what we anticipate that this assistance program could help with things like pavement restoration, landscaping on a property, irrigation, walls and fences that are deteriorated. So any visible sign of distress, we know on a property will attract crime and disorder, and that's what we're trying to avoid by partnering with them to help provide them some assistance. We believe that this will help accelerate compliance in some situations, just because if we are able to assist them with some of that cost, it will minimize displacement and disruption on the business as well.
Any questions?
What is is that pretty significant? How is that different from the process now? You mentioned a couple of things, but.
Yes, Councilmember Goforth. At this time, we will give them a notice, and they're financially responsible for bringing their property into compliance with code, with whatever the violation is. Under this program, we would provide assistance.
Okay, so define assistance.
Financial assistance.
Okay.
We,
Yeah.
obviously, as Jeff indicated earlier, we're only about 30. We have the ideas here. We don't have the specifics. We have thrown out ideas that it could be a something as high as a 50-50 match. It could be a 70-30. The details are still to be worked out depending on the comments that we hear today.
And this is something you've seen in other cities? Okay.
Yes.
And are they pretty successful, and then successful recouping? Do you recoup that money?
So the main, I'll give a few examples, council member. So when we looked at this program and how it's working in other communities, the main intent is to look for particular distress conditions that keep cropping up. So imagine we have a lot of signs, old signs, and you can go out, you can paint the sign. It's still legal non-conforming. It's ugly. They never put a panel in it. sometimes coming in and saying, look, we want to incentivize you to take this thing down. And they're going to say, well, I don't have any signage then. Well, then maybe it'd be a negotiation of figuring out what helps us to prevent code compliance from having to come back out every 2 years and cite the exact same issue, take care of the issue, beautify it, and create a permanent solution that lifts the entire community. Sometimes, especially in depressed areas, they don't have the financial means to do that. And so that would be one of the things that we're looking at the program is, we want to make sure we're not just throwing money at a problem that they could take care of themselves, but it's truly looking at areas that are distressed, financial need, and coming up with a solution that's going to start an intervention in an area.
Question, if I may, Mayor. Two-part question, Mr. Robbins. Where's the money going to come from?
Mayor,
another part to
Councilmember
that.
Adams, we will talk about that at the end of the
that's the
presentation.
next
if I can-
Okay,
if I can
then I'll
punt.
hold my second question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jeff, before you start, questions for Angelica. Enforcement tools, as we go through the process, do you need to upgrade any of your enforcement tools for your programming? Maybe that's a legal question for Mr. Smith, but are the tools in your toolbox sufficient to do what you need to do, or do we need to do something else?
Mayor Freeman, that's something that we have been working on over the last year. We've been taking a look at the programs that we have, such as the abatement program. It had been stopped for a while. We've been working with legal to update and to ensure that the way that the program is being run is legally sound. We've also been working with the attorney's office and the police department and the city court to be able to request administrative search warrants from our judges at our local courts to be able to give us access onto a property. Right now, that is one of our biggest challenges, is that the violations that we enforce, we have to be able to obtain all of our evidence, photographs typically, from the public right-of-way. And so that's a challenge that we're not able to do any of that from private property. But there are some violations and some circumstances where it would be beneficial for us if we had an administrative search warrant. For example, when we have allegations of a boarding home being run, we would need cooperation from the property owner to obtain that evidence that that's actually what is being conducted at the home. With an administrative search warrant, we believe we'd be able to get that documentation to be able to prove that and help work with the property owner to bring the property back into compliance.
I see Mr. Smith wants to weigh in.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, and we are using the term administrative search warrant, but I'll just so people know, it'll actually be issued by a judge. So in many ways, it's a judicial warrant. Many times people ascribe a certain meaning when they hear the word administrative warrant, so it will be actually issued by a judge. So, so it's somewhat of a misnomer. It will be a judicial warrant, where it's administrative because of called out for other reasons.
And
Go right ahead.
at this time, we don't have the ability to request those, but we're currently working through the legal process, setting up all of the procedures to be able to use this new tool.
Mayor, Council, that's what I just wanted to add, because we've heard loud and clear the frustrations with some of our habitual offenders and some of our terrible cases. I know we had one in Ms. Goforth's district, but certainly probably one in everyone's district that could be pointed to where it's just been a lingering issue. And so the direction's been get as aggressive as possible. We want to work with folks, but when they're not working with us, excuse me, and they're not in compliance, then we need to be aggressive under the full force of the law to bring some accountability to that situation.
Well, very good. What's our timeline to put the administrative, or what'd you call it? Judicial warrant in process in
At
place?
this time, Mayor, we've been working on it for about 7 months. We're at the, I will say, tail end of the process. We're finalizing the procedures to ensure that when we are going out to sites to serve these warrants, we have Mesa PD at our side to serve those for us. And so I would say probably another 2 to 3 months to finalize all of the details and ensure that when we are conducting these, we are doing so in a lawful manner.
Okay, I just don't like long timelines, you know, personally. I guess in my career, we move pretty fast, so I guess we need to be legal and make sure we're conforming with laws. but I would just say,
Yeah,
get her done.
Absolutely, Mayor. I think staff definitely hears your urgency in that, and they're working towards it. But you're exactly right. The only thing is making sure that we're dotting the i's and crossing the t's from a legal standpoint. Because if we want these to be able to withstand scrutiny from a legal standpoint, we just need to make sure that everything is in place, and then also ensuring that coordination with PD, because obviously those could potentially be dangerous situations, and we just need to make sure that public safety coordination is in place, and that's what they've been working through. But we're almost ready to go on this.
Well, I'm thinking also to Ms. Goforth's question about cost recovery. If we're filing liens on properties, are we going to go as far as demolition of the property? Are we going to take possession of the property? I'm sure you're going to be talking about that, Jeff, and as we move forward. But cost recovery for our city, and then what happens to the parcel, all those things. Are you going to explain that as well? We don't have to do it now. I'm just saying if it's in the presentation, let's just move forward with that.
I have a fast question for Mr. Smith. Does legal precedent exist in Arizona for moving forward with these warrants, or is this new ground for us?
So I have, the city prosecutor's office has been handling it. I've talked to them, but I haven't looked at the case law, so I couldn't answer that question off the top of my head.
Mayor Freeman, just to quickly answer what you were asking about liens. So currently, when we do cite property owners, if we could provide them several months to pay their fines and fees. If they don't pay those fines or fees, we are currently liening properties to ensure that the city does get reimbursed for those fines and fees if the property ever changes hands. So that is a tool that we currently have available.
Okay, good. Okay, who's next? Jeff, are you?
Yep.
Hopefully we're still kind of on track. Okay. Who's next?
Well, I am. I'll continue on. So Mayor, Council, revolving loan funds are one of the most common tools in the United States. The Economic Development Administration of the United States, the EDA, they've funded through their SEED program over 500 of these across the United States. There are very few of them here in Arizona, unfortunately. But these programs are effective for a few reasons. A revolving loan fund, first, what it is, it's a pool of money that cities or other entities can use to make loans to businesses, and then as those loans are repaid, the money goes right back into the fund to continue making community impact. These do not supplant or replace banks in any way. They exist to handle a gap that exists in the lending market. So we have micro lenders that exist, and they tend to fund up to $50,000. And then from 50,000 to, and these are approximate, about 250,000, there is a gap because the underwriting for a major bank doesn't start making sense until about 250,000. And so you can imagine a lot of small repairs to buildings need to happen within that gap, and there really isn't in the market a source. So revolving loan funds often step in to provide that. And as an example of that, often they will require, as evidence before they make a loan, a denial letter from a bank. So they truly aren't trying to come in and take the place of where traditional lending makes sense. The other great thing about revolving loan funds is they are targeted towards a community's specific needs. So there's a revolving loan fund down in Phoenix. Their specific focus is small businesses and housing. But you can imagine across the nation, there's many different flavors because every community is different. And so these funds, they have a mission. And our mission would be redevelopment and supporting, again, providing capital to help on their own private entities to make the repairs and upgrades that can really create an intervention in a property or in a community. Our goal here would be to pursue the EDA grant funding. This would not be something we'd be funding directly out of City General Fund or any means. So there are some pretty strong caveats here that it's a grant. We don't control if we're awarded. It gets complex very quick. So we're going to pursue this with council's blessing. And it may take a little bit longer to get this, but our goal is in the end to have a fund which would achieve the maximum allowable through the EDA, which would be a $2 million seed fund. We think that could do a lot of great impact in Mesa and fill a gap that we currently have.
Ms. Goforth?
I guess I would just start with, I think it's great that you're looking into this. I've started reading a lot about this, and I think it can be a great tool and a tool for our target, which is that very small business and small business owner, and maybe eventually even that small local developer where they can't get financing for these small local projects that are good for our city, but don't have the capital market to borrow from. So I think it's great that you're looking into it. I'm excited to hear more about this and have you go continue to have it evolve. So those are my thoughts.
Ms. Taylor?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know you probably have more to present, and I have a few questions. I'm holding them till the end. But on this particular one, is there a gap between small business association loans that can't be filled? Because I know the SBA also divvies out loans for, people who just, they have that micro business and they just need that foothold to get started. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
No, Councilmember Taylor, I think you might be referring to a 7A loan or an SBA 504. Yes, those do exist. Again, they have, generally the 7A loan is very flexible. It is a good option. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Sometimes that does the trick. There is, because it's a federal process, it does tend to be a little bit longer. But I wouldn't say it's a horrible option by any means. 7A is very popular. It's very commonly used. I think this would be another option depending on what the needs of that private business owner is. But it can couple well with 7A.
Okay. I have a few more, but I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
One last point on this that's very important is that the city would not be managing this. This is not our strong suit. We don't underwrite. But there are many entities that we've already begun, and we've been working with for months now, talking about how they may be that third party that could handle the underwriting. We would design the program. We would tell them what our priorities are, and we would be referring people that we contact, economic development contacts or development services that we run into, to them. But when it comes to the actual underwriting, helping to prepare a business plan, all the work that goes into a successful application, there's different CDFIs and those are community development finance institutions that are throughout the state that have been doing this for decades and are very successful. They have a long track record. So we, rather than try to get into a business that we don't know very well, maybe partnering with an expert who's been doing this for a long time. So commercial space activation program, one of the experiences we've had many times in downtown, and surely this has been replicated many times around the entire city, is that you have a great tenant or buyer that finds the right building in the right location, and they go in, they want to locate, and the building itself becomes the problem. We have many properties in downtown that used to be a mercantile or an M group occupancy. They would sell shirts or whatever it may be. And then we have a restaurant that comes in and says, oh, this is the perfect location for my restaurant. We want that type of activity. But in doing so, they need to convert from an M group to an A group, or it can be a B. But the point is they're changing occupancy, and that triggers that building now to come up to code. And so at one point, the city actually, through a grant, used a fire sprinkler program to help to, fire sprinklers are often the problem. They're very expensive. And so getting that building set up, just that one component, whether it's that or whether it's ADA access to make the site accessible and safe, those are the types of things that can become barriers and that can lock down a space from really realizing its true potential. So this would be another program where we would see definitely a contribution. This would be a partnership between the owner, the buyer, and the city, but it's trying to identify these spaces where there is true code things that we want. We need that safety. They need it too to operate, and it's just become a barrier. How do we address the barrier? The next program is a public infrastructure program. This is similar, where we have a buyer or a tenant that's wanting to go into a space, and instead of the building being the issue, it's public infrastructure that's the issue. One of the things we've run into frequently is simply going from a 100 amp electric service to a 200 amp. The public infrastructure outside the building can't handle that upgrade. And so now that triggers having to upgrade the transformer, which is a major upgrade. It can sometimes, if it's sewer, it's extending a major line. There was a situation in D2 we worked on actually, where there was a very distressed small property. We had a buyer who was working with us who was trying to figure out how to acquire this site, had a pretty great vision for it. The challenge became is that there was no sewer access. And so his options were to bore under Main Street or to pull the public line up a block to the building. And because it was such a small site, it just didn't make sense financially anymore. And so the site remains undeveloped. It's those types of situations where, and this is very common, very acceptable practice that we already do, but we kind of do it as one-offs throughout the city when we have these types of issues. And this would create a fund for us to be able to go to, rather than approaching the utility and them saying, well, we don't have money for this, and the developer saying, well, I can't extend a line of a half mile. It's trying to figure out, how do we pay into our own infrastructure to support private activity?
Ms. Duff.
I have one quick question, just so that I can follow along. You're talking about the revolving loan fund, and then the commercial space activation program and public infrastructure, and we'll continue on. But are you talking about separate funds, or this is all under the revolving loan fund, or what? Or I'm just trying to see the continuity.
Councilmember Duff, that's a great question. The way we would envision this is that the city has a redevelopment program. So think of that as the umbrella of all the activities that we do that try to support redevelopment. It's the coordination between economic development, DSD, code enforcement. We all work together. We're all part of the program. And then within the program, there are tools in our toolbox. These are all separate tools. They are individual because they don't overlap. They don't always solve the same issue. They don't always help with the same block. And so we would envision these being different tools that we could use to deploy for unique circumstances. And once we get into more of the program design, it may be that some of these fold together to simplify it. We're gonna have to really think about the public view of when we're talking to a developer, to a small business. How did they understand this easily? Because we want to speak their language. And so we may simplify this, but for your question, council member, these are simply all different tools that'll have different requirements, and they all fit within the city's redevelopment program.
And maybe we're getting into, and the same funding sources, or are these different buckets?
Often different funding sources, but some of them will have the same. When we think about redevelopment, this is probably the most straightforward one we think of, and that is knocking a building down. And in many cases, the most efficient use is to try to adaptively reuse the existing building. There are some circumstances where that is not possible, or where the site can have a much higher and better use if a building isn't there. You can imagine a site that has lots of developable land. Maybe it's all being used for a giant parking lot that isn't used in a very small building. It may make sense in that circumstance to knock down the building and then develop the larger site. A lot more tax revenue, a lot more activity, a lot more benefit to the public from that site. This tool, speaking of tools, also has a different component, and that is remediation assistance. One of the issues we've run to numerous times over the past few years that since the program began is that we work with developers who are interested in the site, and then upon doing their due diligence, there is a specter of contamination. And what that most frequently presents itself as is old gas tanks from a gas station that used to be on a site years and years ago. And there's questions about, are the tanks still there? Is there leakage? Sometimes it's not, sometimes it's contained and it's fine. But until there's documentation, and especially it's called an NFA, or a no further action from ADEQ, this is the state's environmental division, that property is taboo for most developers. And so what that presents, and this is very common across the United States, is that it's a block that prevents the private market from working the way it normally would because there's this specter. And so what many cities do is they will support a phase 1 or a phase 2 environmental that helps us to go in, identify where there may be maybe suspected contamination, do some testing. That's the phase 2 part. And our goal would be to clear that specter and say, nope, this site is developable, it's good, there's no action needed, go ahead and use this space. There's actually a really powerful story of that in downtown that Jeff, maybe you want to talk about CyberCore.
Sure, Mayor, Council, everyone's aware of CyberCore downtown. As of this last year, the #1 cidery in the nation, as voted by USA Today. But they started out in a garage, and as their business grew, they wanted to find a home. The location they're at right today had a previous life. A person lived inside that, what used to be a transmission shop, lived inside that transmission shop and held the Arizona's largest garage sale every weekend. And the reason that building was for sale for that whole time, but the reason that building was never able to be sold is that there was a specter of soil contamination from the previous use of the transmission shop. No bank will finance a property sale if there is a specter of environmental contamination. The property owner, since they were running a garage sale, didn't have the funds necessary to do the environmental testing necessary. We worked with our environmental programs group to secure an ADEQ grant of around $30,000. And we went in as a city and worked with the property owner and did the soil testing necessary to show that there wasn't environmental contamination. As soon as we had that finding, that building got sold to the property owner that then went and leased it to CyberCore, who now has grown into who they are today. And taking it to the next step, that building has now since been sold to CyberCore and their group of partners, so that they are here for good. So it's a very small investment that has had significant returns to the city, and it is often addressing issues that just are just beyond property owners to be able to address themselves.
One thing to add on before we move from this particular tool, since we're talking about money and funding sources, our intent here would be to first go to federal sources. And there are many. We're working very closely with Lauren Whitaker and her group in environmental and sustainability to think through this. We've had meetings with different consultants nationally that help cities acquire funds to set up their own phase 1 environmental remediation programs. And so that's going to be a little bit of a longer process. It's money we'd have to go after, and there's strings. So I don't want to say it's going to be super easy or fast, but we think that this could be a very valuable tool for an aging city that has a lot of old automotive uses that may be blocking development on certain parcels.
Ms. Goforth.
I was going to ask, are there quite a few? I mean, is this a significant amount of property in the city of Mesa that this would impact?
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, there is actually, yes, there is more than you would anticipate, and it's because it's a real or perceived contamination. It's that perceived word. So oftentimes it is as simple as doing a phase 1, which is just a record search, and then you can show that say the gas station was removed, or the tank was removed and there's records of it. But if there isn't records, then you always have to go on to that next step of phase 2. Could be laundromats, it could be gas stations. There has been designations, downtown in general has had a designation of a Superfund plume that just kind of floats underneath. And that's where the CyberCore building actually was caught up, is that there's this general designation that doesn't have any real detail behind it, and then you have to address a general designation. So in the valley, yes, we do have a record of more industrial activity in the past. Everybody knows Hayden Wash through Scottsdale. It's a very famous, beautiful recreation, but one of the main reasons it's there is to deal with the environmental contamination, the plume that came from the aerospace industry back in the 50s and 60s.
Quick question, if I may.
Mr. Adams.
So I'm not familiar with how long, let's say, I'll give you an example. Southwest corner Stapleton University. There's now a drive-through Starbucks there, but that's sat vacant for, I think, over 30 years because there was a gas station there that had leaky tanks. So what is when we have a property like that has come under the scrutiny of the EPA or ADEQ or various other agencies, how long do those typically have to sit unused? And are there any other uses for those type of properties that are permitted? And you can come back to us with that, but I'm just curious, because in the case of the old Amco shop down in Robson, that worked out well. But in the case of where we find one, okay, there was a tank and it leaked for 18 years. What do we do with those?
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, we've talked about phase ones and phase twos. There's the next step, which is the phase three, which is actual remediation, where you can, if so choosing, you can go in and start to remediate the soil. You actually dig out what is contaminated and replace it with new. Luckily, as it relates to gas stations, petrochemicals, they actually off-gas themselves somewhat naturally over time, so they can happen a little quicker. But that is one of the reasons why there's a deterrent, because the cost of remediation is often greater than what is the value of redevelopment. So there is that next step. It doesn't necessarily have to be just wait out the clock or find something that doesn't matter, doesn't care whether there's environmental contamination. You can go in and just deal with and remediate.
But Councilmember, too, it's also the specter of the unknown, and this is what a lot of the private owners who are trying to sell their property, they don't want to know because they're afraid it's going to be a complete dig out. But in the phase two, there will often be recommendations of how do you deal with it. And there's sometimes where it's not as bad as they think. It's simply capping it is a way to, putting down some type of barrier. That's enough to take care of it, and they'd be doing it anyway with a new development, so it's okay. But until they know, okay, here's the issue, here's how you take it, or here's what you do with it, there's no way to come up with a solution. So we have to go through the phase one and the phase two if we really want to deal with these sites, get them cleaned up, and get them producing back in the economy again.
So is it your opinion that part of this program could help with properties like that so they don't sit vacant for 30-some years?
Councilmember Adams, that's exactly the goal, is we want to get them productive and back in as soon as possible. I'll be very brief because I know we're going long, but I'm working with another site, also in D2. A lot of my work's in D2. And this is a very large site for infill. And we have a great relationship with the ownership there. Next door, there is an old gas station. And the site is just big enough where it's attractive to certain developers, but if they could assemble both properties and bring it into one, it opens up in a completely different type of buyer, different type of product that would be very desirable and beneficial for that area. But I don't have any tools. And the property owner said, well, I'd rather it's easier for me to just have somebody come in and reuse it without having to deal with the remediation. It's cheaper and easier. And so that's what I'm gonna do. And our goal would be at least to come to the table in certain circumstances and say, well, we have a way of at least helping you figure out what you're dealing with, and then you can make a decision. And it may not be the biggest problem that you think it is. That would also help buyers who want to assemble those properties to understand what they're dealing with. And so just, again, go back to sometimes the best and most powerful thing we have as redevelopers is information. And that's the point of the environmental remediation, is to get the information so that everybody knows what they're dealing with, and it frees up the market to work the way it should.
Jeff, I'll just add, I know that ADEQ has a remediation program for fuel systems, so I'm sure you've checked into that and make sure that we utilize that in your toolbox too. Carry on.
Jeff, do you want to take this one?
Thoughtful and strategic placemaking initiatives can have a direct impact on economic activity. Here in the city of Mesa, we have examples of our efforts having those impacts. Whether it be something like the Southern Avenue streetscape and Fiesta District branding that continues to support significant reinvestment in the Fiesta District, or whether it's helping Jay and helping a burgeoning economic activity area like the Asian District establish a brand in place through branded signage. I love that sign. These kind of strategic interventions can have a real impact on establishing a place, stabilizing it, and encouraging redevelopment. The program that we're looking at, including this in the program would give us the opportunity to establish some criteria by which strategic placemaking initiatives from the public can be layered with other redevelopment strategies to ensure and help support the redevelopment, implementation of our redevelopment program. So this is, I think is our council's last strategic planning session. Development services, Rachel talked about a program to look at gateway signage throughout the city and create an overall arching theme. But you can imagine within that overall arching theme that there are economic activity areas that, like the Asian district, where having a brand associated with it would be very beneficial. This would allow us to look at opportunities to fund those types of interventions.
All right, so that comes to the conclusion of the tools, but we want to talk a little bit about our evaluation of each of these tools again. One of the key things that we evaluated for each one of these tools is a state construct called redevelopment areas, RDAs. We have 4 RDAs in the city currently, but one of the reasons we're very interested in how these tools would play with RDAs is that the RDAs give cities, I'm just going to read it verbatim from the screen, but every municipality may use its funds for the purposes of aiding in the planning and the undertaking or carrying out of redevelopment projects in its area of operations. So it gives us some authority to work and to deploy these tools in a different way. We looked, again, at federal funding. I won't belabor that one. We've talked about it. We've met with the Office of Management and Budget. We've met with the City Attorney's Office. And then one of the things that we've considered for each of these is it easy for our stakeholders to use? If we make it burdensome and confusing, they're not going to use it and it won't be effective. So we've just got to make it simple. We do need reasonable reporting. We need to know if it's effective. And so we need to think about that very carefully. And we have to make sure that it's not so cumbersome on staff that it takes an army to run. It's got to be efficient. So we're now going to move into the last phase of this presentation on recommended resources. Again, early interventions in decline and disinvestment, they go a long way, and that's what these tools are intended to do. Other cities understand that, and they're deploying large amounts of money into their downtowns, into their older areas. These are snippets from real news articles that we've grabbed from the last year or two, talking about cities around the country that are investing in their cores. And there are great examples all the way. We talked about at the beginning of the presentation about some of these case studies. We look at South LA before 1990. We look at River North in Denver, incredible story, old industrial area. It got so run down that finally poor artists went there because there was nowhere else to go. It was cheap. And now at the city, 2003, they put together a massive plan for how to revitalize that area. And I've toured it. It's an incredible revitalization story. Chattanooga, Gary, Indiana, many places where they've taken interventions and we've learned from those and they've turned areas around. Our recommended funding sources, in this order, is we would like to seek federal funding sources first whenever possible. They don't always work, they're not always available, but where they are, our goal is to use those. Next, we would like to try to use redevelopment activity revenues. So this can be revenues from GIPLET leases. We bring those to you occasionally to approve, and there is revenue attached to those, sometimes direct negotiated amounts. Sometimes it's just an annual amount that they pay us, but that can be reinvested back into redevelopment so that redevelopment pays for redevelopment. That's ultimately the goal we'd love to see. And then finally, we'd be looking at one-time set-asides from the general fund to fill any gaps that the first two cannot handle. So our recommendation, council, to you today, on the left here in the red, those are all the programs we've talked about, but in the middle is our recommended funding request for this next fiscal year. It would be $3 million annually. This would work basically as funding as a bucket of money. We, at this point, because these are all new and we don't have great examples from around the state in some circumstances, is that we want to let the private sector tell us where they have the need. And so if we see the code compliance assistance program is really hot and there's a lot of demand there, we'd like the money to go there. And if we come back in a year or two and retail tenant assistance just isn't working. We want to figure out why, and maybe there's no demand. That's okay. We can shut that down and divert resources to where they're needed. But we really want our private partners to tell us where the need is. And then finally, we'd be looking at the EDA grant. One thing that's not on here is we're also now exploring a brownfield grant, but in working closely on that one. We've made less progress on that particular grant, but our goal would be to achieve the full allocation maximum from the EDA, which is $2 million. It gets into the weeds very quickly, but that would not be a single tranche. That's multiple tranches over years. But our goal would be to pursue that, be successful, and to receive the maximum award eventually. Evaluation of this program, because it is new, is incredibly important, and we will be putting in, it will be balanced, we need to be usable, but also very specific measures to help us to understand whether we're achieving the needs and the goals of what we intend. So we are proposing to pilot the program for 5 years. We would establish the KPIs, the impact metrics. We'd report back to council annually. And then in 2031, after we have 5 years of data that really tell the story, council would do an evaluation of what a permanent program could look like in the city.
I'm sure there's
so Mayor,
questions.
Council, let me just expand on that a little bit. So the notion would be that we would not establish this as an ongoing program within our budget line item through this. We would treat this as annual one-time appropriations. We would identify construction sales tax dollars or other one-time dollars that development going back into reinvestment into redevelopment that we could utilize over that 5-year period. As Jeff alluded to, we would look at that annually too, see which programs are having higher demand than others. There may be a reallocation year to year between those different buckets, between those various programs, depending on the need. And then we can evaluate that on a year-to-year basis. But I know the desire is to have that as a pilot program to see the ROI, right? We don't want to stand up this program and these tools and not see results come out of it. And so that's why we would treat it that way, at least through this pilot program. And then if it's successful and it was council's direction at that time, we could think about the long-term sustainability of that program. But this would allow us to take those best practices that they've identified based on council's direction to see greater emphasis on redevelopment, really test it out, kick the tires on this, see what the needs are, see what the demand is from the market in that regard. And then we could talk about the long-term sustainability if it's been a successful program.
Okay, Council, Mr. Adams.
I want to, Mr. Butler, I want to make sure I understand what you started out with. You would run this program outside of the general budget?
Yeah, I think what I just want to relay to council, it would be included in the budget. It would be adopted as part of our budget coming up. But this would not, by green lighting this today, I just want to give the assurance to council, this isn't a now forever program that the city is undertaking. This would be a pilot program that we would evaluate annually. And then see if the results are derived from that that council would like to see. So instead of standing this up and saying, okay, this is something we're getting into this business and we're going to do this perpetually as an organization, I just want to assure you that we're going to take a close look at what the results that are derived from these programs.
Understood. Is on its face, what I see here, it looks in one light like a $15 million ask 3 times 5.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's not that.
It's fair to say it's that, council
Okay.
member. It would be $15 million over those 5 years, $3 million a year. The allocation of how those buckets are divided, how that $3 million per year is divided, is something that staff will come back to and provide recommendations to council as they put, the meat on the bones to get to that 90% design, using Jeff's analogy on that. And so that they will come back with some recommendations for council to consider that this program should be allocated X dollars, this program X dollars, adding up to that $3 million. for the next fiscal year. And then every year we would evaluate that. If one program had tremendous demand and council thought that it was a very successful program, we could reallocate those funds within that $3 million allocation. So one program, we may double in year two because it's been so successful. So we would look at that and be flexible as each year depending on where the needs are.
So last question, Mayor. If this moves forward, is it fair to say this is a $3 million ask of the Mesa taxpayer or no? And if not, where does the money come from?
Yeah, Mayor, council member, and as staff alluded to, they're going to try to identify other sources, federal grants, other things that could be utilized as part of this. But what we would do is take one-time dollars derived from construction activity in the city and allocate that in the budget on an annual basis up to that $3 million mark.
That construction activity would happen anyway.
Correct. And we always, Mayor, council members, you know, we always have to be very careful about how we treat those one-time dollars because it is generated depending on economic conditions, building activity. So that's why we felt with the importance that we've heard from council over the years about establishing a redevelopment program, the use of that development dollars to go back into reinvestment within the community for redevelopment purposes made a lot of sense. And so we could identify those dollars and allocate those dollars in order to fund this activity.
Okay, I would feel better about weighing in on this today if I already knew where we were going with the budget and what our deficit looked like.
Sure. And
no, thank you.
And that's, and Mayor, council member, you certainly, we're not, your blessing today from council would not in any way preclude those discussions because we've still got to put the meat on the bones. We've still got to come back to you with those funding recommendations and how that would be allocated. And then that money would be set aside as part of the overall budget discussion. But that's to give you, because I'm sure we didn't want to not talk about that today because of course this all sounds great, but money's the issue, right? So so we wanted to at least tell you what our thinking is about how these funds would be allocated.
Money's always
money's always the issue, absolutely.
Mayor.
Jen?
If I may,
Jay.
Mayor and Council, I think the point too that we wanted to make is we've been doing redevelopment on a case-by-case basis. So what is the benefit to having a program that is adopted and supported by council? From an economic development perspective, what this does for staff is provide consistency and understanding of your priorities and what you are willing to support at least over a 5-year program. And what that does for the market is signal to developers, property owners, and businesses that we are wanting to partner with the private sector and wanting to really prioritize redevelopment. So we care, we have goals for redevelopment, and now if the direction is to move forward with this, we have some formal toolkit that we can utilize. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't come back to you with these different scenarios and projects, but at least we know now that we have a fund that we can work with rather than slowing everything down and trying to cobble together deals. Speed to market is so critical when it comes to economic development, and this allows us a very quick step to know, yes, we have funding for this, and this is how we can put the deal together.
Thanks for weighing in because I was going to ask you to. Nana, did you want to have any input with?
Yeah, Mayor, Council, one of the things that we also have to be mindful and continue to do is remove all the regulatory barriers that at the end of the day, you can have all the money, but if there are regulatory barriers, you're not able to move forward. So we are focusing on from development services and that aspect, working with other departments. We will be coming to you sometimes in the middle of the year to talk about infill and ordinance that we are working on with a consultant to really address the unique circumstances that do exist for infill and redevelopment properties.
Very good. Jen?
Yes, thank you for the presentation and this opportunity to really make a remarkable change in parts of our city that need it so desperately. And this, as a reminder for council, the redevelopment areas and this project and Jeff's position and his initiatives stemmed from a council priority that we needed to do something about these blighted areas of our city. We have our redevelopment areas. And I assume these efforts are going to be within the construct of these redevelopment areas, because then we have the tools defined by federal authorities that this is, a deemed area that can be supported.
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, in many circumstances, the RDAs are a good place to deploy these. It helps us to focus them, and we have the extra protections provided by the state statute. However, there are others like the infrastructure tool that can be citywide. Another thing we've contemplated as part of this is if we need another RDA, one that goes down. Right now, our RDA is linked up with our, not to get too technical, but our central business district, our CBD, and we did that so that it would unlock the GIPLET lease benefit. But there's nothing to say we couldn't create a separate RDA that's not part of the CBD, and that would allow us to target other areas, focus areas that we've already come back to you about in the past that are outside the current RDAs. So to answer your question, for the most part, yes, RDAs make sense, but some can be deployed outside, and then there'd be the consideration of perhaps creating new territory.
And from what I understand, some of the funding sources that we can go after, whether federal grants, CDFI grants and funds, if it's defined within a redevelopment area, that will be a qualifying factor to go after those funds. And so that it's not, we can go after those with those. And I like our redevelopment areas, of course, because most of my district is a redevelopment area, but I am concerned about District 2 that isn't part of the redevelopment area. There's so many blighted properties along Main Street. Yeah, and expanding, doing another RDA, I think it would be significant for that area to bridge. It's been blighted for a very, very long time. Another thing is, just to give an example, this came up last night. One of our small businesses called me in downtown, and they had just opened. And when they went through redevelopment of the site, they put in significant dollars that were unexpected into these old buildings. They always have problems beyond any comprehension, and you have to throw money at it well above budgets. Well, now there's a sewer line problem that is backing up, and they've exhausted all monies. They are stuck. They are stuck. How do they replace a sewer line right now? You can't. Sell the property because it has a sewer line. You're stuck. And this sewer line thing is recurrent. It's very common. So I hear these hardships, especially around the downtown when they're working with very old infrastructure, very old buildings. The costs are enormous, often sometimes wanting to be abandoned, or in this particular case, if you don't have the funding, you just have to shut down the business. What do you do? What do you do? So just understanding that and seeing the hardships and going back to our COVID time, I think it's very important that these efforts, these funds are only to small businesses. During COVID, I think is it under 50 employees? There was some kind of designation we gave it, but only small businesses, going back to what we defined at that time, because there was some thought about what is the definition of a small business. Small businesses that are able to keep on going are contributing tax dollars that stay in our community. If we're talking about large companies that maybe this is a chain or a funding, those tax dollars, not the tax dollars, but the revenues, the profits from that business are leaving our community. They're going to some other state, some corporate structure, whatever. And also, when you're part of a corporate structure, there are other funding mechanisms. You have loans, you have deeper pockets, you have means in order to remedy a property. So I think it's very important that we keep it local and that we keep it for small businesses. That's where we can make remarkable progress. I like the example of Cider Core, where a garage operation and now is a national sales distribution of their cider. So, and that is homegrown businesses that are contributing to our community in so many ways, and those dollars are staying here, and it's a source of pride that we have. And we have that opportunity to do that throughout the city in a strategic way by using these funds. And we're going to hit more businesses too. If we start supporting larger businesses, those dollars are going to, the larger footprints, larger projects, those dollars will be exhausted very, very easily in helping less businesses. I think, oh, and make sure we don't have any residential. I think that's understood. This is only for businesses. I think that's about it.
Mr. Heredia?
Curious on the interplay of, we have the process of the CCD committee. I know in the past we've used some of that funding for like signs at downtown and some commercial. I know it's limited, but there's some CDBG funding that can go towards some of this redevelopment of activity. That's my first question, and then thoughts on, I know I've had some brief conversations, getting other types of resources, other private or public partnerships. Like I know Mesa has had a IDA in the past. I know Phoenix has a very successful IDA program where they work with nonprofits, businesses, and others to get private activity bonds for redevelopment in some of these blighted areas. So I think there's things out there that can actually add a little bit more to this, and just us being flexible on adding those tools to the toolbox, that not necessarily we have to invest all this money up front, but we work in these partnerships in identifying federal funding, private funding, public private fundings on that end to remedy some of these areas. So,
Good.
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, thank you. We have had conversations, and we have used CDBG funding in the past. In 2017, when we did our first facade improvement program, a good chunk of that was funded with CDBG dollars. Now, that it comes with the understanding that using CDBG for economic development efforts is actually very difficult, and there is it's more challenging. And on top of that, the CDBG funding levels across, just generally across the nation have decreased, and the amount available to the city is significantly less than it used to. And it's for that reason that we have not included CDBG funding as one of our sources in this program at this time. Councilmember Adams, there's one thing I did want to a nuance that I wanted to put forward. While that $3 million annual funding is up there, there's going to be the buckets that make up that $3 million may just be general fund allocation, but we also, some of the council members, we had an opportunity to brief you on a redevelopment project that's underway right now that we hope to bring forward, the OVO project, where they're requesting a GIPLET lease from the city. We have negotiated with that developer a one-time $500,000 payment to the city that would be able to be used for redevelopment activity. If that is successful and that is approved, that $500,000 would be built into that bucket of $3 million. So we are looking to generate revenues in the redevelopment program that then would feed that $3 million allocation. So every year, I think the buckets are going to be different depending on what we success hopefully means that $3 million coming from the general fund is going to be made up from revenues as much as possible. Sorry, Councilmember Heredia, yes, I think maybe Jay, you might be able to talk to it better. Mesa did have an IDA. I think there's a good reasons why we don't have one now. We do and would like to be able to work with other, whether it's Phoenix's IDA, Maricopa County's IDA. We are looking at we're working with other partners like Terry Benelli at LISC. They have a significant allocation of new market tax credits that could be very beneficial to us. So while we're looking at these funding sources, we are out there scouring the world for additional ways to be able to fund these programs as well.
Ms. Taylor?
Thank you so much for this presentation. I echo Ms. Duff. My district has a lot of redevelopment opportunities. I'm actually really excited about this presentation, and I do know that money is an issue, and I know we'll get more into that. But for the sake of the council and for the public, sorry, I always feel like I need to just eat the microphone. I'm going to fire away some questions that I thought of as you were going through your presentation. If this is something that you're thinking, hey, that's going to be part of the second presentation where you have more of this built out, just let me know. We can skip to the next question. Is that okay? Okay, great. So let's start with numbers. Do you have an idea of how many vacant properties there are in Mesa overall?
We do not off the top of our head, but I do believe that we can work with our GIS department because we do keep the land use layers, and we could probably identify that and get back to council with that answer.
And one other way to add that too is that we do have a water utility, and so when this is one of the things we were thinking about is as a water service is turned off, that may be an indicator that the property is vacant. So that's another way that we could try to gauge the number.
Okay. So then along that note, can we also get an idea of the percentage of those properties that are just in neglect, the ones that we are eyeballing that need help? Because I know some will be vacant, but the property owner may be in the process of working on that development in the near future. And they don't, we don't need to be looking at assisting them. These are the ones that I'd like to know, what percentage are we looking at as a city that need our assistance?
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, making notes. That may be a little bit of a heavier lift because it almost requires eyes on to tell whether it's in neglect or whether it's not.
Okay.
We'll let us explore options and see whether we can come back with a solution to that issue.
Okay. That's good for helping us have like an empirical need that we can determine a solution for.
Councilmember Taylor, one thing to chime in on that, we gave a presentation, I forget the exact date, it was our last one, and we brought to the council focus areas. Our intent with that was to capture areas where we didn't have the exact number of the buildings, but we had identified different corridors, different shopping centers that were in need of revitalization. And our intent there was, so it was a different way of quantifying.
I have a lot of them.
Yeah, actually there was, one of our focus areas is all up and down Main Street from the west side to the eastern border. So that was our attempt at trying to quantify. So one thing we can do is look into those. But Jeff's right, you have to almost have a criteria of, well, is this in distress? Do they need help? It gets a bit subjective.
That might be good though, for quantifying what is needed and qualifying it, having some of that criteria, which I know that might be part of your KPIs. So then I'm guessing we probably don't know how many are completely vacant, meaning there's no structure at all, versus how many, okay. Didn't know how deep you guys dove into the numbers, that's why I'm asking.
Councilmember Taylor, the one thing I can say, and as my first answer, it should have been more nuanced, vacant land is so much easier for us to identify because it is a land use category that we already track, and we'd just be able to identify those by just doing a simple search.
Great. Vacant
Vacant properties within is where we have a little bit more challenge. So, yeah.
Okay. Have we identified property owners in your research to build out this program? And I think it's exceptional, the work that you've done to do this and going forward, or at least propose it. Have you talked to property owners in Mesa already? Have you had conversations with people so that, you can say, yes, we feel very confident in this toolbox because we know people are waiting for you to say yes so that we can help them?
So, Councilmember, I transitioned to our next slide. That was a great segue.
I have more questions.
We will come back to your
Yes,
questions.
okay.
This question ties directly into where we were headed is Our thought process is we didn't want to go out to the development community, the small business community, property owner community, and with tools that we hadn't brought to you first. We wanted to make sure that we had a nod that you are comfortable with the approach. And then our approach would be then to take these programs, once we add a little bit of meat to them, out to these stakeholder groups and get their immediate feedback. It may come back that something we thought was going to be great, they don't care about, or they may be able to add value and thoughts that we hadn't considered. We realize that ultimately we're building a tool for the private sector. The private sector is going to be the best ones to know about it. So that is definitely actually number one next step for us to do is to have those conversations.
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, we do hear a lot from the development community and small businesses about how sometimes difficult it is to redevelop some of the infill parcels in Mesa. Actually, Councilmember Goforth and I had a meeting with a property owner, and the whole discussion was about the difficulty in developing infill parcels. So we've been hearing a lot from the development community, some of the tools that we may need to look at to really help foster that environment for redevelopment.
If I may add one thing too.
Absolutely.
So when the program began, we didn't have any tools except for GIPLIT and some of those other federal tax credits. So tenacity was
Fortitude.
the tool. and so our plan was in those focus areas is to go out to every single business in that focus area and have a conversation. We've pivoted a bit. We've had some other priorities, but we did start that. We've gone through some of our focus areas, and it was through that work that we've heard from them. Here's the problem I'm running into, or I've had this and this complication. And so all of that feedback that we have through that work and gathering, it's fed directly into the tools that we chose. That's how we were able to take those national examples and right-size them to our local needs, because we had began having case example after case example in Mesa, and we thought, okay, we're starting to see a pattern here. We need a tool to solve this.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. This is also for the public because they're watching this. I want to have these questions prepared. So then let's see, that was numbers. Let me go down to money. So the EDA grant funding is about $2 million. Is that right for these loans? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. EDA grant funding, I think you said is around $2 million. Are we the pass-through for that? Like, are we getting the grant and then we're giving that to the business owners that we've selected to help? Is that correct?
So, Councilmember Taylor, we're going to come back with more details on this. We had our preliminary meeting with EDA only this last week. It took a while after the holidays to get in the room with them. Sure. They are very busy. So we understand that the program could work here. There are a number of barriers that we're going to have to work through. We started working through and figuring out exactly pass through. We would be the recipient and ultimately the party, and then we'd have a managing partner who would work with us. There's other details such as a match. The city would not provide that. We'd have to raise that through a CDFI partner. So there's a lot that's going to get into this. Okay. And when we come back, we will have a really great breakdown for you of exactly how it works, exactly where we're at in the process. Any identified barriers, we'll lay that out clearly for you.
Okay. Then just let me know as I'm going through some of these questions. We'll come back, or we have that one. So then, if we receive the loan, and if we need to come back to this is fine, and it's not repaid by the business owner, I was wondering, is it Mesa who's suffering ultimately, or is it the original grantor who would be getting the brunt of that defaulted loan?
Councilmember Taylor, that would be the fund. Okay. So it's not, the city wouldn't have to necessarily come in and say, oh, now, surprise, we have to come up with $10,000 to repay the fund. The fund accepts that we are, the loan itself, the loan pool is working with small businesses. There is a rigorous process to vet who receives a loan and qualify that person, where it's not just anybody who walks in the door. And so because there's a responsibility of that fund to maintain the fund, and the idea is to grow the fund. And so with any type of revolving loan fund, there is a realization that there's a risk of non-payment and default. And sometimes that does happen. One of the things that was encouraging to us in doing the research was looking at some of these I mentioned earlier that there are some organizations in the state who've been doing this for decades. Their data, they have the default rates, and they are much less than you would think. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but we did look at that, and it was an acceptable amount, and it keeps the fund stable with the amounts that are paid back with interest. So the goal is always to grow the fund, to protect the fund, but ultimately, I think what you're asking is the city responsible to keep the fund and up and come up, pull out a general fund? We couldn't do that, and even if we wanted to, and that would not be how it would work.
Okay. Then let me just make a note of that. When you are ready, or if this is just a question that you would like to, or a discussion you'd like to have with us individually, I would love to know what the qualification process looks like for these businesses. We talked about SBA loans. Thank you for explaining those. Okay, so Indy Car Wash. If the property itself is in a condition such as that one, is it possible that owners like that one would not qualify for anything? And in that case, do we have a backup plan for those types of properties? Because I'm looking at how many steps we've already been through with this particular business owner, how difficult it's been to work with this business owner, and the trajectory in my mind is that there is a strong probability this particular business owner, and maybe some others like them, that have neglected and dilapidated properties, I especially know in my district, may not qualify for some of this funding. And so I don't know if you've thought of a backup framework for how we would work with those particular business owners. If you haven't, bring it back to us, something to think about.
I have a few thoughts, and then feel free to jump in, but we talked about a new RDA.
Please put my district in it.
Our goal would be to target the areas which we talk about decline and distress. It's about wrapping in those areas. So first step, let's try to get as many of the areas where we see problems qualified and within an RDA.
Yes.
I think we want to always start with that ultimately we are working with private property owners and we are here to help. We're here to knock down barriers, especially if there's concerns about, the city's so complicated, I don't know how it works, I don't even want to engage. We're here to simplify and remove any barriers that we can. But ultimately, if this property owner just said, hey, I don't want any help you've got, I'm going to do what I want, there's limitations on what we can do. But to your question, let's say it's outside of a new RDA and there's a need and there's nothing we can do. That is the point at which we would try to look at what other options. We have an expanded toolbox. Maybe it is a 7A. That really probably is the most appropriate because that can go to businesses anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it this way. We're going to have areas where all or most of our tools apply, and we're going to have areas in the city that may have need where not all of our tools apply, and we're going to have to pick and choose, and it gets harder and harder in certain areas. We have fewer tools.
Thank you.
And if I may, Councilmember Taylor, kind of add another thought to that, not to focus too specifically on the Indy Car Wash, but as Angelica had mentioned, there is a next step with that one.
That's where my mind was going.
There
Sometimes
could
you
be
just
a
kind of got to
next step.
crack the whip and say, this is absolutely dilapidated. It's actually a safety issue at this point.
Right. I don't know that the city wants to, rush down that path thing, but
No.
there is a path to the next step that does force change.
Okay.
But to your original question is, we could also have properties that clearly qualify for a program, but we have owners that don't.
Okay.
What we haven't talked about and what we will be bringing back to you, what is the criteria for being to qualify, but also what conditions come with that qualification. We aren't necessarily in the business of just handing out dollars without some kind of return that we want to have, and that may come with a requirement for development agreements that say, if we are to give you this, you shall do that. The Indy Car Wash would be one of those ones. If we were, I think if we were to qualify, just knowing its history, that we would want to have some type of conditions attached to those dollars so that we can ensure that
I
we
want
have
to see it redeveloped. I want to see it look really good, but
Yep.
those concerns are very valid too.
And another thing that we've talked about with Jim and his team is that, while redevelopment areas are a powerful designation right now to allow us to work with this, the conditions of slum and blight exist throughout the city. And addressing conditions of slum and blight, regardless of whether it's in an RDA or outside of an RDA, is a public benefit to us that will help us qualify properties that don't necessarily fall in an RDA today.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
To bounce off one of her concerns is, would we be placing liens on the property as a condition of taking a loan? So if they do default, we would be able to get that. Looks like I just put an idea in your head. All right, let's work on that idea.
Leverage.
At least that, it's just, when you have a mortgage, it's kind of a lien against your own home. So I think that would be a condition we should look at. I'm generally comfortable seeking other alternative revenue sources for this. I get the CDBG challenges. I guess my concern is our construction sales tax. We already utilize that for other things in the budget. So what's the give by redirecting a portion of those construction sales taxes to this program? What program is that coming out of?
Sure, and Mayor, Council Member, Vice Mayor, let us come back to you with those details. We want to just, again, make sure that we're on the right direction this morning overall, and OMD's got some ideas about that, so we'll coordinate with them and come back with you with a more thoughtful discussion about that aspect, so.
Okay, and then the last thing, Mayor, is I think, I generally support this. I think this is a good idea. We have a lot of areas that could really use it. I'd like to see this assigned to a council subcommittee so they can keep a closer eye on it, whichever one that is.
Yeah, that's a fair ask. Let's go for it.
Yeah, thank you for all your work. I mean, this is absolutely a council priority. We've talked about it for a while, and I appreciate you all going out and measuring and researching the market in this area, or what other cities do in this area, what works, what doesn't work. And it is really twofold. I'm glad to see that as well. It's not just this toolkit of programs and potential funding, but it's also regulatory, that we have to get rid of some of the barriers to being able to do these great infill projects. And as Nana stated, I've brought several different developers in to tell us, here are the pinch points that I see in the city, and Nana's been really great about trying to address those. And over a program time period. I mean, he can't do anything at the moment, but anyway, he's been very receptive to those suggestions, so thank you. And I'm glad to see it both. And as Jen stated, just really to reiterate, if we don't do programs like this, we get what we get, which is large national tenants that can pay to redo some of this stuff, and that's what our residents tell us, at least they tell me, that's not what, we have enough of that. That's not necessarily what we want to see. So that's one of the big whys on why you do that. In addition to, we have some areas that, well, I'll just leave it at that. And as far as the money, I see it as exactly as you stated, Scott, this is sort of a zero sum. Something else will have to give. So we have said as a council, this is a priority. So something else will have to fall down on the priority list and maybe not get that funding. So this is not an add, but this is a reallocation, which is what we as a council said we want to do. We want to decide based on what our residents tell us is important to them. And our residents are telling us, including our non-residents on Monday night that like to tell us, describe it as the ghetto, right? And he's talking about these areas, and our residents have said, we got to do something about this, and you've come up with a plan. And so that priority gets elevated in the budget, and something else falls off. That's the way I see it so far, unless you tell me otherwise, and then we'll have to have that discussion on.
That's the way it works.
That's the way it works. Mm-hmm. So I think that's I appreciate your points too, Jay, as this also signals to the development community. That's very important that we're serious about this. Come partner with us. Let's get this done. And we have the other important part is it's pilot. It'll be evaluated every year, and there are going to be, from what you said, specific metrics, KPIs to determine, is this successful? Is it not? How are we doing on this? And that's always very important to me. And I appreciate that it's going to be a program with accountability, that we can hold you accountable and our residents can hold us accountable too. So, thank you.
Mayor, I just want to just capitalize a little bit on what, there is an ROI on this. There is not using code compliance in heavy-handed ways of trying to make a property productive. That's very costly approach. But if it is a productive business, it is contributing to our economy and contributing to our sales tax, that there is a return on the investment. So it's not completely just investment and that's it. There is a return to our city, and that's what we want. We're a city that depends heavily, heavily on sales tax. We need our land to produce for us, our businesses to be able to prosper and have areas that are getting reinvested in, just because we made some small investments, some small changes in one area, and then success breeds more success. Other people will come in with private dollars to invest. So there is an ROI. It's not just a zero-sum game or even a lost investment. Thank you.
Mayor, and I think that's a really important point that Councilmember Duff just made, and that's all part of this. I mean, part of it is the aesthetics and community pride of doing away with blighted property or other things. The other is selfish. It's ROI. I mean, if you can take a non-producing or underproducing piece of property that's then going to have a higher use, then that's going to generate more revenue to allow us to do these types of activities that council prioritizes. And so you're exactly right, Councilmember Duff. That's a huge component to why we would do this.
I only had like 2 more questions. So I just wanted to wrap. Can I ask?
You just about used them up.
I know. I waited until the end because I knew I had a whole bunch. So I'm going to skip over some of them because I think they're going to come back to me. I was just curious to know, have you spoken with the Mesa Chamber of Commerce in any of this? I know they work with a lot of businesses. Are you partnering with them in this?
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, we always partner with the Chamber, and when we're talking about doing focus group with stakeholders, we'll partner with the Chamber of Commerce to engage their business community. But we have regular communications with small businesses all the time, and they're excited about the opportunity to learn more about this program and what council is going to be putting in place.
Yeah, and Mayor, Councilmember, I'll expand on that a little bit. In just the conversation we had as a staff level a few days ago about this, that was an area of emphasis because that's one of the sweet spots that Sally and her organization bring to play, is being able to get that outreach and communication to small and medium-sized businesses. And so we definitely are going to look for every way that we can to engage the Chamber and their communications apparatus as well to help get the word out to individuals that might benefit from these programs.
Okay. And then my last question, I was just curious to know also in the toolbox if you've considered putting in either local or even maybe statewide angel investments or private equity firms that would be interested in coming together and pooling in this type of investment in our small businesses to help them.
I don't know that we've specifically included that, but we would love to have as much, capital, venture capital, angel investors, any of them that please send them our way. We will.
As you wish.
Yes, we would love to have that internetwork. And if it's not just to directly invest in this idea, but to have people that we can bounce ideas off of as well, as what would it take for you to want to be an investor here? So yes, please send them to us.
Thank you so much. I am very excited about this. I've had a lot of residents tell me they really would like to see some new life breathed into District 2. So I'm pretty thrilled. Thank you.
Nana, Jay, closing thoughts?
We're going to march forward and get all the tools that we can utilize to make this happen. So.
Okay,
I'm
Jay?
excited. I think it'll be great. Thank you so much, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity.
Well, I'll just summarize. This has been a long time in coming. I know you know that council has asked for some type of direction we can give. We have so many underperforming properties. I've talked about it on our arterial streets, our shopping centers. Infill is going to be an issue on some of these, but just getting these businesses, Ms. Duff is correct, on our sales tax revenue, we need to find creative ways to help economically our city thrive, and that goes along to our neighborhoods. Just some of the wrap up I didn't hear about on our code compliance. I'm sure you're going to work with our building inspection department, our fire marshal's department, because they're out there every day doing inspections in our community. With that, again, on general fund dollars, I'm a little apprehensive on that. I'd like to make sure that we minimize, because we're actually asking, for some cuts, something's going to have to drop in priority. So we'll have to be careful on that. The question I had, Mr. Butler, who's going to manage this overall programming for it? Because this seems like, okay, these guys only have so many brains to use, and, how can they manage all this? Because that's one of my questions. And staffing for code compliance. I mean, if staffing is not up to par, do we need to staff more for full-time, positions? Do we move people around because to oversee this program, to make it work? We're talking about continuity, follow through, and make sure things are being done effectively to utilize all the tools we're talking about. With that, if you want to answer that, after which we'll have a 5-minute break.
Sure, Mayor, I'll just say we'll use all of their brains on this, and you're right. Even though we're presenting this today as an umbrella initiative of redevelopment, of a redevelopment toolkit, each individual program will have its unique needs and administration that's attached to it. And so it could be that Jay's office is responsible for one, while Jeff's office might be another, and Nana as well. So we'll work through those details. And I think the Vice Mayor had a great suggestion that we'll, of course, report back to
the CCA,
to the committee on that, and they can understand how all these activities are moving forward as once they're activated, and so we'll be working through those details. But we didn't, of course, want to get ahead of council on this. You've been asking for this. We wanted to show you the direction that we were heading. We've heard some very positive thoughts and also some great things that we need to keep in mind as we start to build out these programs. And so we'll do that and then come back with more information, and we'll have more talk, Mayor, of course, about the funding as everyone's alluded to. We'll work through those details and get back to council on that.
Good. Do we have a timeline for that?
Yeah, it'll be as part of the budget discussions, Mayor.
Okay.
And I think Councilmember Goforth, nailed it, and her description. I mean, we hear this is a big priority. So we're not talking about, besides Jeff's point about if we can generate revenue based on these programs to invest back into the program, we're certainly doing that. But we are just prioritizing the funds. We're not raising taxes to pay for this. We're not adding anything else to pay for this. We've heard from council this is a priority, and we're going to prioritize that in our budget using our existing resources.
Yeah, I think someone said having development pay for redevelopment.
Yeah.
I think that's a key point that we need to
Because,
strategize.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mayor, but you just think about the amount of resources we as an organization put to aid development, new development coming into the city. Right, and so to think about that, I mean, we talk about the price tag with this program, and $3 million is a lot of money, don't get me wrong, but if you think about the millions more that we spend day in and day out, that Nana's office, Jay's office, everyone to help recruit and bring new businesses and to help developers get through a greenfield project maybe on the east side of town, this is very important too. So this isn't unlike what we are doing as we're spending millions of dollars for new development. We're putting money and investment back into redevelopment as well.
Well, I'm sure the Vice Mayor will be talking about that towards the end, about the ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings we recently have and more forthcoming. So Jay, thanks for your work. How about a 5-minute recess? If not, they will trickle in. Do we need the city clerk here? Or do we have, we're good? Okay.
Lisa's got it handled.
Very good. Council, any hard stops? Mr. Adams, do you have to leave? Okay, gotcha. Other than that, welcome to item 1B is a presentation and update on the Office of Innovation and Efficiency in efforts related to strategic use of data and performance management. Evan and the team, Ian.
Yeah. So Mayor, I'll just open this up and then hand it off to the experts over here. But, one of the things that I've talked about coming into this role is making sure that we are being the most efficient and effective organization that we can be. Like we said, the use of our resources, because as we just had in the last discussion, if we can make sure that we're doing the most efficient with the resources that we have, that can create opportunities, finding cost savings using technology, efficiency through process as well, which is, you'll hear a lot about that discussion this morning. So Evan and his team have been working for years on different ways that we use data-driven decisions, the way that we partner with our departments to make sure that they are using the best process and procedure as possible. But we can step up our game in that, and that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. And this is also going to be an evolution as well as an organization, as we're really looking, and that's why I wanted to brand this the Office of Innovation and Efficiency, because that is what we're going to be asking of our departments, that they are looking at innovative solutions, they're looking at efficiencies throughout the organization. Just because we've done something from a practice or procedure the same way for decades doesn't mean that we can't change or that we can't use different tools, AI, other resources, you name it, all to make sure that we're more effective and driving that. And sometimes, as we know, in the private sector, there is a monetary incentive to do that. And so we're just making sure it's ingrained in our culture too, that even if you don't have shareholders in the sense of you're a public company on Wall Street, our shareholders are our taxpayers, and we have to make sure that we're driving that efficiency so that we can continue to deliver those services for them. So with that, let me turn it over to Ian, and he'll get us kicked off.
Great, thanks very much. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Excited to be with you. I don't know that there was really much more we could do after that. That was an awesome explanation of what this group is endeavoring to do. But let me
move to adjourn.
I'm good.
Michelle and Evan are like, great, we're off the hook.
No, I got to make sure that you get to hear about the great work that's already happening and it's about to continue in the months and years to come. But so real quick, Ian Linson, Assistant to the City Manager. I have the pleasure of getting to work with this group. I'm here with Evan Allred, our Chief Data Officer, and then Michelle Trejo, who's been with us for about 6 months now, who has really reinvigorated this group. She's our performance administrator. So with that, let's get moving. What is the Office of Innovation and Efficiency? Well, it is made up of a small but mighty team of performance advisors, data analysts, who are back here with us. I can give you a wave right here. They do really, really good work and have been doing good work for years. And so this is an opportunity really to reintroduce you to this group that has been renamed, recharged to OIE. And this is our public purpose, why we exist up here on the screen. But really what it distills down to is a citywide effort given extra power by this group to look for efficient and effective delivery of service throughout the organization. So you got to hear about the external initiative the last 2 hours. We'll give you a 20-minute view of this great internal initiative to improve our city and our organization. So what does efficient and effective mean? I mean, this is a big deal to us. We want we use data, you'll hear about this, to inform our organizations. We also want to kind of really think through and be meaningful when we talk about these things. So for us, I'll read these two verbatim. Being efficient is producing the intended community outcomes with minimal waste, delay, or rework. Being effective means delivering the right service at the right time, at the right quality, using the right level of resources. So those are our reasons for being, our driving factors, the words you will continue to hear us use over and over. The departments will get sick of us, but then also they'll come to love it because they'll see all of the great benefits that come from these initiatives. But what we are really driving towards now is sustainable efficiency. So not one time, but a culture of continued improvement, a sustainable efficiency, which Michelle's gonna go into much greater detail on, but real quick, what is sustainable efficiency? As I said, not a one-time approach. We can do it over and over. It's embedded within our culture. We think about it inherently. We don't just, maybe we have a tried and true way of doing things, but we don't just do things because we did them. Over and over. But before we jump into what that really means, I'd like to just share with you what this group has been doing and continues to do today. So these great services have been offered really on an ad hoc, more or less basis over the last few years. So let's just walk through them real fast. We assist with managing with data. You've seen that more and more over the years. We come to you with data to inform the decisions that our departments make, hopefully help you all as the elected officials inform your decisions that you make, but we try to make this our lifeblood. Use data to inform our decisions. We have what we call business solutions. So you can think about process improvement in this category, ways to look at how we've been doing things, see how we can improve them. Performance reporting. So, it's one thing to say that we're going to be doing all of this. It's another to see if it's actually had any result. And so already today, you've probably all seen it. We have some dashboards out there, both internally and externally, that show how our groups, organizations are doing. This group assists with creating and maintaining those. Data governance. So not only are we data informed, but we have to understand what are there guardrails that need to be put around data? Are there certain usage best practices about that? Evan leads that effort and it's an iterative process over time as things change, as new security issues pop up. This group helps understand what does the data governance look like for the city, but also it's an effort to reassure the public that we think very much about the importance, security, and that sort of thing of data. Capacity development, so just same type of a thing, building within, better enabling our departments themselves to strive towards this culture of continuous sustainable efficiency. And then a really, really big piece, storytelling. But this is strategic communication about what we are doing, how we're doing it, the successes that we're having, but even maybe some of the failures, some of the places where things aren't going right. I mean, we heard in the last presentation that, we want to know that because then we can change, we can iterate. We don't have to just keep doing the same thing over time. So this group helps with that. So that's very, very quick overview. Now, want to turn it over to Michelle, who has brought this new vitality initiative to the group called Performance Plus. She'll walk you through that and all the steps after. So Michelle.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. So happy to be with you here this morning to talk about all the work that we're doing. I think it will resonate with you quite a bit. As Ian stated, we are taking the efforts that we've already been doing in the city of Mesa for quite some time and just kicking it up a notch, taking it to that next level. And so what we're introducing...
I was going to use the word elevate, Michelle.
It's on the screen.
That's a better word.
I know. Elevate. It's there, see? We are elevating our efforts, and we're doing so through a program called Performance Plus. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. It's a systematic approach that ensures alignment across the organization with the council priorities. And really thinking about the stewardship of the city's resources and constantly looking at continuous improvement, innovation, and efficiency and effectiveness. And that's why we took great liberties to work with Mr. Butler in making sure we defined what efficient and effective is, because those are just like really great buzzwords unless you have an actual definition to it, right, and an effort towards it. And we believe that that's what we have here now at the City of Mesa.
So, Evan, can you go back one thing? But this is really important. I don't want to gloss over this as well. Ensuring alignment with council priorities, and Michelle highlighted it there, but that's so important because how do we get to spend a lot of quality time together here in this setting and in other discussions, but we're a large, complex organization, right? 4,500 employees, a lot of different business units throughout. And so day to day, as people are going about their jobs, going about ensuring they're delivering those crucial services to the city, how are we making sure that those activities are aligned with those council priorities? And so how does that permeate through the organization, not just something we sit around this table and talk about? And that's what Michelle's going to get into, because that's so important, right? Because you talk about the culture of an organization, but the priorities of an organization. Councilmember Adams has talked about, the fact of, how do you ensure that you're stewarding those resources, properly throughout the organization, and that's the alignment with council priorities and making sure that we're in line with that. And that is what this exercise and this involvement of Michelle and her team are making sure that we're doing, thinking about, and prioritizing on a day-to-day basis, not just once a year during a budget presentation, but through our day-to-day activities as an organization. So sorry about that, Michelle. But
no, that's great. So the three pillars of our efforts really are envision, elevate, and impact. So let me just spend a little bit of time on envision, meaning you as a city have already been working on for quite some time the collection of data, the use of data in making decisions, and also reporting that data to the public. And so we are truly taking it to that next level, not abandoning any efforts, not leaving any of that behind, but taking that and building upon it, moving us into this new era of elevate and eventually into impact. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that means. And so where are we really going in this new elevate portion of our work? We're really going to go from an outputs-based organization to an outcomes-based reporting organization. And, I gotta say, it's very common for government entities to lean in to outputs-based. It's not bad because we're not private sector, right? We don't produce a widget. We don't have a store or what have you. We don't have profit margins. We don't have things like that. So a lot of times in government entities, we lean into what do we do, the bean counting of everything, and that becomes the norm. And what we're looking for now is, as we hear what your concerns are, is more of like how effective we are rather than how busy we are. And that's really what this elevate portion is going to become, is using our outputs that we've been collecting for quite some time and now showing how they drive outcomes in the city. And we're really excited about that. So we're going to do that through these collaborative partnerships with the departments. And we've already begun that process. We have 30 departments that we're working with, and we're defining through this process the outcomes that align with the citywide priorities, as Mr. Butler stated, focusing our efforts on outcomes that matter most, and then establishing these meaningful KPIs and these leading driving metrics. And when we talk about focus on these outcomes that matter the most, we kind of have been going about it as if like, say, our department. If we were a store and we were selling our products as OIE, right? what are they buying from us? Like, what does that look like? Instead of like, okay, I'm producing this report and this is how many people are coming here. And no, what are they getting? What are they buying from us with their tax dollars? Like, what are they getting? And so we're working with departments in these partnerships to show that, to help them report that back. And so we have an example of, here's a dashboard template of how we're going to go about doing this as far as reporting is concerned and driving those conversations. So for every KPI, outcomes-based KPI that we have in the departments, they will have these dashboards. Again, this is a template, but the concept is, if you notice up on the top left, you'll have your the purpose statement of the department along with the associated outcomes-based KPI. Within the purpose, it clearly states where the outcome is, and that outcome KPI is right under it. All of these driving indicators that we work with the departments, all of this output, these outputs that they've been collecting over time, we're going to help them take these outputs, learn and develop these dashboards so that we can report really meaningful data, and also, most importantly, drive efficiency, drive effectiveness, and have us level up, have us elevate. What's new here that we haven't quite had before, which we're really excited about, is to have tiles in there that include service delivery impact as well as budget impact, because we've heard, we're listening to what's important to all of you, and we want to be able to speak to that. We want our departments to be able to speak to that with confidence. And what this also does is drive these very pivotal conversations with city management and other departments as we collaborate together. I'll touch a little bit on about how that works, and we interweave through other departments to work this all together. But this would be the dashboard in moving forward on how we would be able to convey those stories and also give you all the information that you need. It's also there, we're also here to interconnect priorities across the organization, to identify pilot and scale processes. I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide or two. Workflow, system improvements, all of that. And then elevating data-informed decision-making, using all of that together so that we can all make the decisions that we need to make using data rather than anecdote. So here are some of the examples of work that we are doing currently, really exciting, pivotal things that are going on within the city of Mesa. First of all, we've got collaborative efficiencies going on. I think some of you may have heard our department is working in the building permit review process to streamline that, to improve the efficiencies, remove the redundancies, produce, make recommendations for a new process that will increase speed to market. I think Jeff and Jay both kind of touched on that a little bit. That is a collaborative effort. There are 13 departments working together in that process with us. It's been incredible. We're also working with PD and their hiring processes, as well as capital improvement and kind of like bits and pieces in there that need some process improvement as well. We're entering in this new era of reporting called quality indexing. We're finding that as we embarked in working in these partnerships with departments, that as we pull away from output-based reporting and more about outcomes-based reporting, that there's a need for more of like an index type of reporting, because there's so many components that can go in to these outcomes that our citizens and customers are looking to have improved upon. And so we've got economic development that's working on an incredible index of competitive positioning. We've got urban transformation on doing one on economic vitality or urban vitality. We've got police that's working on one right now for safety or the public view of safety in Mesa as a whole. And all of these indexes don't rely on just one type of piece of data. They are hybrid models that may include not just data itself, but also a component of surveys as well. We've got collaborative measures, really exciting stuff going on with fleet and solid waste in order to look to optimize our fleet. Workforce readiness, working with economic development, as well as urban transformation to improve efforts there. Managing with data, and I'm going to turn that over to Evan to talk a little bit about that.
So you, as a council, you've already seen a lot of data-informed topics come to you, and you've made decisions using that data. And so I don't want to recount those experiences, but just give you a little glimpse into the data analysis projects that are currently in flight or that are just about to kick off. So with that first one, specialty licensing and permits, that's intended to capture where we have a bunch of activities where we're looking at things in departments around turnaround processing time. So examples, building permits and planning cases. What are the turnaround times for those? What are the bottlenecks, and maybe why are those bottlenecks occurring? Third, fourth, fifth submittals. What patterns or trends can we see in the data about those kinds of cases and those kinds of permitting requests? Why are they going to third, fourth, fifth submittals? Similarly, with business licenses and specialty licenses, so think of the general business license that the City of Mesa has, a short-term rental license. And so again, processing time, but then also specific to short-term rentals, how many of those properties that are out on the market, if you look at Airbnb or Vrbo, how many of those properties are actually licensed with the city? So that's some of the data analysis work that's going there. And we're about to kick off a public records request redaction analysis, looking at the data about how long it's taking to process those public requests for information, and where are the bottlenecks? Maybe why are those bottlenecks occurring? And then going back to Michelle's group, now what do we do with remedying those bottlenecks? The second grouping there, water and energy resources, I'm very excited. The city recently hired 2 data analysts to help with our this mass flood of data that's now coming from all those water, gas, and electric meters that are sending data every 15, 60 minutes and making that data into information. And so we're very excited about the work that they have already done and are doing. There are literally dozens of projects either completed or in flight in that area. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight a wonderful partnership we have with our university community and Arizona State University, partnering with us to help develop prediction models. And so 3 that we've highlighted here on the screen: code compliance, and that's a prediction model looking at caseload across code compliance case officers, and geography and processing time, and being able to predict and then better allocate case officers. Water mains is another one that ASU has helped us with, looking at water main breaks and then predicting where those breaks will occur in the future, and then what are the attributes that go into those, and then what can water services do to proactively prevent go and take care of that before it becomes a catastrophic water main break. And finally, pedestrian-related fatalities and injuries is a topic where we've had ASU partner with us to look at where are those incidents and events occurring, what might be the commonalities, either at spatially the intersection or things around that intersection that might be driving it, or other factors. And then again, being able to have a clear picture of what's driving those kinds of activities. So again, just a short. Yes,
Yeah,
Vice
I'm
Mayor.
going to add one for you. I think fleet services and deferred maintenance could be another area, predicting when vehicles might start to break down and cost more.
Absolutely.
So we'll throw that one in for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, that's, yes, Mayor, Vice Mayor, that's absolutely something that's being looked at. So you're right on point with that. But just to use the real world example that the mayor had just mentioned when he talked about code compliance just a few minutes ago. And so, if you're not using data informed decision making, then historically, what do people do? They throw FTEs at a problem, right? They're like, okay, well, is that it? Then let's get more staffing. Surely that will solve the issue. And that's not. We realize how foolish that is to believe that just because you throw more people at an issue, that's going to lead to a better outcome. And as Michelle's been talking about, so what Evan's describing is exactly the real world analysis that we're doing. How can we better allocate the resources that we have? How can we get those efficiencies from those FTEs that we have in situations like that? It may, after we do that analysis, it may say, yeah, you do need another FTE, and then we can talk about that. But it's not about always just throwing money at a problem or new money at a problem and saying that's going to fix it. And PD's done a great exercise. It started under Ken Cost, and now Dan Butler's embraced it, where we looked at the allocation of our officers. Which areas of the city are they assigned to? Which beats? Where's the most effective use? Instead of just saying, okay, we're going to divide these up, by the area of the city, without really looking at that crime data, without looking at all the other intricacies that go into how long they stay on scene and in one area maybe versus another area. And there's differences with that, right? And so our past chief and our current chief have embraced that we've got to use that in order to allocate those critical sworn officers that we have. So those are just a couple of examples of how we can drill into this data and then allocate our resources appropriately without just throwing money at a problem and thinking that's going to fix it.
So just in closing and make the there we go. Just in closing, and kind of the culmination of the work that we're doing is something that we call threading. So we've been working with departments over the last 3 months. And when you're working with them in this depth, what happens is a myriad of needs surfaces, right? Oftentimes process improvements, oftentimes systems issues and all of that. Well, what a threading process does is allows us to see what departments are all sharing in that same issue, concern, challenge, need, what have you. And it allows for us to now prioritize or bring a list together to then address the efficiencies like in one fell swoop in each of these areas. And it's quite amazing, to be honest, and we're really excited that that's the next level of our work that we'll be going into. But that really is something that's amazing because it allows us to look system-wide at system-wide workflows, value chains, all of those things. And we only see really great, amazing things coming from this work. So, any questions?
Thank you very much. Council, I'm sure there has to be a few. Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to go first because I have a little bit of a time constraint here. Comments would be this, and I'm not going to really drill down into the weeds here, but I like the overall concept. I think when you have an opportunity to make decisions based on hard data, that's the way to go. The real litmus test, however, is once we have the data, look at where it points us, tell us what it's saying, we make the changes. Have we really made effective use of that? Are the efficiencies truly improved? What's the bottom line? So I think that's where our intention is to go. Just a couple of thoughts here. As you're moving forward with this, I have found over the years that oftentimes the people on the line, in the field, doing the work, they're the first to tell you with great accuracy what's inefficient about the way they do their job. Whether they're bolting cars together on an assembly line or digging ditches or framing houses, those people know what the company is requiring that is just ridiculous. So I would encourage input from the folks who are actually doing the job, whatever the job is. Again, I'm not going to get into great detail, but I will give you one example. I wonder sometimes whether in our permitting for events and things like this, we spend more in terms of resources than we possibly could see in return? And I'll give you some real specifics one-on-one if you'd like. But if we spend $2,000 in FTE time and our net TPT result is $300, I wouldn't do that again. But so I think we should look at that. And I would really encourage input from many, many sources. Are you planning on taking public comment on this? The public sees issues that they feel we're doing things inefficiently, or is this entirely internal at this point?
Well, I'd just say, Mayor and Councilmember Adams, I mean, we're always open to that for sure. I mean, and you know, a lot of the team has good connections throughout the community. Many of the team have been here for a while, and so we definitely take that. And it's totally something that we would love to do.
And Mayor, Councilmember Adams, I think I'd also add, each project has to be looked at individually, and I think depending on the audience and who that's targeted at, there is, and I'll use Nana for example. Already, he's alluded to the fact through their process improvement efforts that DSD has been going through, they have had stakeholder groups from industry, from the chamber, from others that they've reached out to, and so I think you'll see that on a case-by-case basis because each process improvement is so unique to who the intended audience is, and if it's an internal stakeholder, making sure that other departments are utilized in that. And to your point too about making sure that those actually doing the work and are part of the decision making. And I want to point back to maybe the PD exercise on that. Through that process of kind of realigning those allocations, I think, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, but each and every sergeant in the department was interviewed and was brought in and went through meticulously. What are you seeing? You're in charge of a group out here. What are you experiencing on a day-to-day basis? And then the lieutenants on top of that. So it wasn't just the chief's office saying, here's on paper, this sounds great. They actually walked through with the men and women out in the field to make sure that what they were proposing actually gelled with what our officers out on the street were actually experiencing. And so I think those are examples of where we got to ingrain that kind of decision-making and input from those being impacted by the change. So it's being done with them, not to them. And I think that increased its buy-in so substantially, no matter what department you're talking about.
I think that's great, and I encourage that. Yeah, those sergeants, they're probably not a very opinionated group.
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay. Mayor, I need to be excused. I've got a business obligation. Thank you.
All right, copy that. Oh, sorry, they come out wrong.
I got it.
Questions?
I have questions.
Okay, Ms. Taylor.
So I came from the world of data, and this is actually a very complicated situation, but I'm hoping I can keep my subject simple. Is it my understanding, just to make sure I'm clear, that you are essentially coalescing all of our departments, and you are measuring or giving them KPIs, because obviously busyness is not productivity, and you're defining an outcome versus an output, and then you're measuring the efficiency and the effectiveness of that output based against what standard, first of all, and how are you coming up with their KPIs? Are you just working with their leadership? Are you going above to the city manager to determine what the council has said? We want to see this in the future. There's so much to it. I won't take up all of our time, I promise. But this is actually a really big rollout.
I just want, before Michelle's going to take this, Mayor and Councilmember Taylor, but she's done almost everything that you have just said, so I can't wait for her to talk through like what that looks like.
Thank you, and I'll slip you your 5 in just a minute. All right. Councilmember Taylor, we did take all of that into consideration. So what we have done is we've worked with departments, and like we stated, in a partnership where we began in an exercise of identifying their activities, their outputs, their inputs, like what was really going on there, working with them so they could develop their purpose statements that really highlight their outcomes, helping them. Part of our job is to facilitate them through this process, right? As the subject matter experts in that, not their business, but in how to get to where they got to get to in measuring it. And so we did. And so what came as a result of them identifying their actual outcomes to the public was the identification of their KPIs. And then through that, we work with them. Now, as far as like how they're developed to a national standard, some are to a national standard, but we also took into consideration what were the needs here in Mesa and what was expressed by council members as a priority, and taking all of that into consideration. Some of them are straightforward KPIs. Some are indexes, as I discussed earlier, where we had to have a compilation of this data. I actually am really excited for the day that you get to see the competitive positioning index from economic development, because it's incredible. And so it's not just one size fits all.
Okay.
It really was to the need of the city of Mesa, the department, national standards, kind of all put together.
And then, yes, Evan.
Mayor, Councilmember Taylor, I would just add to that the council priority alignment piece is what is the step we're in right now. So the department director is now meeting with their requisite, the assistant city manager, deputy city manager that they work with regularly, and running those KPIs by them, then the outcomes that they've decided on, to check for that council alignment, and then have a further conversation. Hey, I think this is a hot topic right now, or I think the council's direction is this, and then have the director make adjustments in their outcomes and KPIs based on that discussion.
I'm going to ask you a hard question. Who is determining your KPIs and measuring your performance in outcomes versus outputs?
For our office, we have developed that, but that would be our boss, Mr. Butler.
This guy, and you're measuring my KPIs and outputs, so that's so absolutely, and that's why that alignment is so important, and we talk about it a lot. I mean, we see we're a seasoned organization, right? We're over 100 years old, and there's certain things when we talk about prioritizations, about programs and projects. Every single thing that we do day in and day out was a priority at some point, to a council, right? And some of those things have continued on, some of those things have transformed, some of those things have been terminated. But now, as each council changes and those priorities change, we've got to be flexible with that. And so that alignment with your priorities makes sure that as we're prioritizing with limited resources, and we look at the programs, we talk about the have-to-dos versus the nice-to-dos. And there are some programs that at the time might have been essential. Maybe they were a need to do at the time, but they're not anymore. Or maybe there's, other entities outside that are now doing that activity. All of the above or some combination of that. That's where that really helps our departments, especially as we enter into budget season. And this is where it's collaborative. This isn't something that's being done to them and shoved down their throat. This is empowering them so that they can understand how the services they give day in and day out align with what your expectations are as the board of directors of this city. And so that is really, I think, the big distinction about what this office does is that it really helps empower our departments and challenges them to make sure that they're thinking day in and day out about how those programs and projects are aligned with what the seven of you are articulating are your priorities as a city.
I have one more question. I think it's great that we have a lot of things that are in-house and they can be controllable, but every so often, because predictive analytics can almost be a 50-50, you can see wonderful models be very successful and extremely helpful in facilitating future progress and growth. I've seen it myself. It's amazing. You can also see predictive models start us on a track and then we find out it failed. And so we take action in the negative direction. Are we considering as a body every so often, annually, maybe once every 2 years, having an outside auditor build out or test our modeling so that we can determine that our own internal predictions are the most accurate and the best before we start applying physical resources to these ideas that we've built out before we start conveying them to other people?
Great question, Councilmember Taylor. I agree. Prediction models need constant looking at. Are they still representative of what's happening? Are the variables and the data we're putting into those models still representing what's happening in the real world? And it should be the case that we're always looking to how do we improve those models? And then we've been talking a lot lately internally and with others across the city about willingness to fail fast and to identify, this is to Michelle and her team's point about identifying why do we do these activities? What is the community impact that we're looking for? Are we seeing that community impact because of this model that's guiding us in this direction? And if not, why not? And fail fast and make adjustments to the model, make adjustments to the policies, and to be willing to say, this isn't working like we hoped it would. We need to address it. That might be the case with the fleet maintenance model. Is it achieving the community outcome that we need to have for an available fleet? And if not, let's go back and make some tweaks to that model. And so we are very cognizant of that, and we'll be always looking at that.
So we are open to being tested from an outside source just to ensure that we are achieving a certain level of accuracy and excellence?
I think we should always be open to doing that.
That's good. Okay, thank you.
Yes, go for it.
I guess that's why I was happy to see, and maybe this is an industry distinction or term. I'm not in this industry, I don't have this background, but that it's data informed and not data driven, right? So data is good, and for all the reasons you stated, sometimes it can drive us somewhere we don't want to go, right? So it's just a data informed, including all the other pieces. And I'm happy to see that there are these qualitative indexes, because those are important too. So I think you're on the right track. I'm excited to see this. You've been doing this for the last 6 months?
Michelle's been in this role.
I've been in this role for the last 6 months.
I mean, the amount of what you have accomplished in this amount of time, I'm blown away. I mean, this is fantastic. Thank you, and your team. I mean, you've already done a lot, and I mean, so Scott Butler's not messing around when he's like sense of urgency. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Scott, and thank you to all of you. I had a couple, outcomes versus, by the way, I love data, I love process. I think we all know that. I'm one of those people. So I think this is great. And I'm glad, because I've asked over and over, and I think not just me, but what is this information telling me? We have all this information on our website, and I've had residents say, this is all great information, but what is this actually telling me? So this outcomes versus outputs, I think, is, obviously on the right track, and I appreciate that, because really it is about what are we trying to do here? What are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? So. And I think it's great that you're embedding it within department. So it becomes this culture and this ongoing process for every department, and not just, you all in your own little silo and dipping in, as you do your work, but it runs within, and I guess it's this threading. I don't know if that's I'm not sure if I've got that right, but anyway.
You've got it right.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So anyway, thank you.
And Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, let me just, keep going back to this example, but I think it's just a real world example to prove your point, and something Councilmember Adams had said earlier about employee input. We make data informed decision making, and the PD example about the allocation of the officers is a great example, because the data told us one thing kind of from a black and white standpoint and put us in the right direction. But you had the chief who came in from a management standpoint and said, hold on, this isn't taking everything into account. There's some intangibles, as we were talking about allocations in West Mesa and crime rate, that were just, that the model just wasn't necessarily taking into account. And then you take the beat officers, the officers out on the street who are experiencing that same the same experience that the chief was pointing to. So then we were able to decide on a model that was data informed, but had those tweaks based on the feedback and the real world experiences from our officers and our management within the police department. And so that's how it's supposed to work, right? That you start with the data to help drive you in a certain direction, but then you take that information and you take the real world information to tweak it and perfect it and to make it actually workable, and also to get that buy-in from the people who are going to implement it as well. So that's a perfect example about how it's supposed to work in an organization.
And Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention one thing that is making this quite successful. We are supported greatly by our leadership that allows for us and affords departments to have real conversations about maybe the areas that are not performing well, but they are actual outcomes related pieces, instead of, having maybe like a performative nature in how we report, but rather have these conversations to discuss the real matters at hand and how we can improve and where we need to reallocate. You guys talked about reallocating some things today to meet priorities, and what this effort does as a result of our leadership that backs us up and supports us in these efforts is what really makes all of this work as well.
Very good. Ms. Duff?
I'll be really quick. I just want to say that we do have an audit department that does audit processes as well. So if we're putting into a new program, of course, we pilot first, but that we do have an audit department that is not just financial, it is process and looking at that and taking every single step that everybody is doing and finding out where the failures are, or maybe it's working fine. So it is not the end all, it is just the beginning. And I would like to say, government has a reputation of being very bureaucratic. If you want to get something done, it's going to be a process. And we have a lot of processes. And sometimes when boxes can't be checked, that's where I'm sure we've all received emails when the system isn't working, right? And we know, because I've worked in a lot of redevelopment with the downtown and such, and I've ranted about this before in strategic planning before, how when it doesn't go as our system designs, it gets kicked out, and then people decide what they're going to do. It usually you have to go to like 4 levels till it finally gets to Scott, and they said, yeah, the person who had a solution on day one will go ahead out of standard and will support that. So, but we have processes that aren't a process and they get kicked out and go awry, costing our citizens money and time and our resources as far as staff. We have people who spend 80% of their time solving problems. Well, why is that? Well, let's look at what processes are going on, what is failing, and redo that so that people are working on driving us forward, making us more innovative and efficient, and instead of working on things that aren't processes that are not serving us, boxes that can't be checked. What is that box, and how can we make those common sense solutions? So it's just moving to catch up with the 21st century of what's possible, and creative, innovative thought leaders within our city by being able to take on these problems in new, innovative ways instead of saying, I can't check the box, I just have to kick it out. Thanks.
Frankie?
No, I love this, and I think we should figure out how we do more in the future as far as we develop a system of within the departments and looking at how we can maximize some of this new technology that's coming to help our residents and our business community, so we can maximize results, right? So.
Thank you.
I have one more question. Go figure. I know it's a study session, though. It's a study
You're going to use your mulligan up now.
Well, nonsense. Will council have access to a dashboard where we get to see? Okay, yes, that's what I wanted to know. Do we get to see the data? Because that's what I want to see.
You can keep your mulligan because
Hey.
I had that question. So
Look at you.
took care of that. I'm a young man, let's get a second opinion from my sister here.
You don't want to go there.
What I haven't heard is most of us attended NLC recently in Salt Lake City, and there were a lot of breakout sessions regarding this topic, as well as using the word AI to help facilitate finding inefficiencies in organizations. In fact, some cities use them, saving multi-millions of dollars and finding a lot of redundancy in programs, employees doing this and that. So to that effect, I would hope that that identifies areas where we can be more conservative financially with all that we're doing. And, you know, for example, today we have an ombudsman in our planning department, I'll say it that way, to help facilitate connecting problems between here and there, between the different departments. Now, is that really necessary? Well, it is today. I'm hoping we find these inefficiencies, we strategize in how to make it better for not only the applicant, but the end result, saving time and money. The other question I had, are we willing to make changes and delete programming if it's not working out to our city? I mean, why spend monies that are not being effective to what we're trying to do? And I don't know what they are. I mean, we've had some prior discussions last year in the budget session about the Parks Department. What programming do we keep? How important is it? I would like to know, is it efficient? You know, and I'm hopefully you have this information prior to our budget decisions so that we can make informed financial decisions for our city. The last thing I'd like to say is it was suggested that we assign your group to maybe the Audit and Finance Committee and come in and give us a report to Audit and Finance so that we have continuity, we know what you're doing, and that will be at the discretion of the chair. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
So, Mayor, I would just add to, and maybe Ian could just speak briefly on the role of AI in this, because it is extensive as an organizational tool that we can use. But from the point about programs and staying with programs, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Well, first of all, efficiency of programs is one thing, and that's what we're going to work on. Prioritization of programs is another, right? And that is where we'll certainly look towards council and look at council direction on that, because with you know, when you've got a limited set of resources, when you've got a pie, how you split that pie is going to be dependent upon the direction that's given. And so we want to get, and we believe that the programs that we have and are offering have all been important to either, you know, a constituency group, a previous council, all of those derived from, you know, a solutions base to the issues at the time. Whether they've outlived their lifespan, that is something that is set by the priority of the council, and whether we should prioritize that funding towards a new initiative or a different initiative, or to just stop that initiative altogether. And that's some of the direction, of course, that we are going to rely on the seven of you to provide.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, Mayor, thanks, Scott. Mayor, I'll touch real briefly on AI. I know, like, I'm probably as frustrated as some of you from hearing me say, like, AI is going to be doing stuff and we haven't actually seen the results yet, but I promise you it is going to have a lot of utility in the years to come. We are actively working on some things to try and tease out those areas that make sense, but I can tell you from spending a lot of my free time reading up on this something that's very important to me and to all of us is to make sure that we can feel confident that these tools are doing what they say that they do. They're providing the outputs that are accurate and that sort of thing. And I'll tell you, it's still tough. Even though there's some great things that these tools can do, it's still tough to feel confident about that on an enterprise level. And it can be, I mean, very dramatic differences in maybe some of these outputs. So anyway, so those are things that we're working through. But I hope that I can come to you soon, individually or at a meeting like this, to talk to you about some of the things that we're going to be able to implement in the not too distant future. But it'll be a through line in all of this work for sure.
And let's be clear too, and I know Ian could could take another hour, which we won't do, to drill down on this. He's talking at an enterprise level, as he said. I want to stress that point. You know, we're already looking at different AI tools and programs on a day-to-day basis, whether it's plan review, whether it's, you know, code compliance, you name it. There are tools out there, some more ready for prime time than others, as you all know, and that's the case with any kind of technology program. But we've got an AI working group throughout the city. You know, we're looking at that on a case-by-case basis. And I think what Ian certainly was referring to is just seeing at an enterprise level, you know, there will be transformative things that we see over the next decade, certainly on the AI sphere, but we will, you know, every day continue to look at tools and programs that are AI driven and AI enabled that help us do the business that we do.
Before you roll this out officially, I echo Mark, hopefully it'll be before budget, so, you know, we have time to look at it. Do you have a sandbox that we can play in to see how it looks or anything?
For the dashboard?
Yeah, just to,
In the coming months, yes, we will have. As we stand up dashboards, absolutely, we can
Okay.
make them available.
that would be great, just so we can kind of get used to how the current layout is, and if there's recommendations, and we have time to make them before you're like, oh, here's your final plate of dinner, and we're like, I don't really like it.
It will be, there'll never be a final, you know?
No, exactly. And Mayor, maybe just real
Our
quick.
proposed dinner.
Yeah.
Mayor and council member, I do want to set expectations that, you know, there will not be some sort of eureka moment between now and the time you are all discussing budgets, because that's happening in weeks. There may be some insight that can help drive that conversation. We hope that there is, but what we really hope is that this starts to snowball, and by the time we come around next budget cycle, and then that you will really have some tools that maybe just didn't exist prior or weren't as readily available. So I just want to set that expectation.
I appreciate the work because the status quo needs work. Thanks.
Okay, with that, thank you, Ian, Michelle, and Evan. We'll look forward for you soon. Item 2 is acknowledge the receipt of board minutes. Is there a motion? Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Duff. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next is current events and conferences attended. Council, would you like to share?
I've just been following around you guys.
We should let Vice Mayor Summers share.
Actually, I was looking at it, and since Monday, there's only one new one. The Cambria Hotel is, we did a groundbreaking yesterday. It's a nice brand to have into the community, given the growth that's happening in the area. But even more importantly, the Cambria brings an element of, you know, that local hospitality. You don't have to stay there to use the amenities there. They will have a limited restaurant. But even more importantly, I think, is the rooftop bar that everybody's been excited about with a view of the Superstition Mountains. So why would I bring that up? I don't know. But they hope to open in 12 to 14 months, and it'll be a nice addition to the neighborhood.
Very good. Ms. Taylor, you want to?
I only have the economic development lunch that we attended on Tuesday. I went with Mayor Freeman, and we saw Councilmember Alicia Goforth there, and it was very educational. We got to meet with our legislator, Justin Olson, and talk with him for a little bit. So, yeah, it was great for me. I learned quite a bit.
Our Uber was Miss Kathy McDonald, so I thank Kathy for that. Ms. Goforth?
Just that.
Okay. Well, most of us attended the East Valley Partnership Breakfast with the governor. I think all of us were there at the table. I also attended last night a UN delegation for Family Watch International Reception, multi-globe at the Doubletree Hotel at the hotel at Allen School in Hampton. Forget. It's been a long day already. So with that, Mr. Butler, can you share a schedule of future meetings?
I know, I told Councilmember Heredia, I'm like, 2 items, you know? I thought it'd be a little quicker this morning, but there was a lot of meat on these 2 items. But, yeah. So, Mayor and Council, we will reschedule the Audit and Finance Committee meeting, so staff will be working with those respective members to find a time, hopefully next week, I believe is the intent. So our next study session will be next Thursday, January 22nd at 7:30. Just a reminder about the MLK Parade and Festival this coming Monday. City offices will be closed as it's a federal, state, and local holiday. And just a reminder that study session on the 29th has been canceled, and so it'll save the vice mayor the long drive in from D6 that morning. So no study session on Thursday, the 29th. So just a reminder. The mayor is going to be out of town that day, and then it's also overlaps with the City Managers Association meeting. And so several of us will be out of town as well. So.
Do we have any other elected officials attending the MLK Parade with us?
Do we, Andrea, do you know by chance? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
I thought maybe Senator Gallego might be joining us.
Yeah, I think Senator Gallego is.
On the list, but I do know it's an East Valley parade, and so we do have some participants from other cities and jurisdictions that do come.
Just want to make sure they're recognized as well.
There is, and Mayor, because it is an independent
East Valley.
committee that runs at the East Valley MLK committee. They're responsible for some of that, so I'm sorry we don't have those exact names, but there usually are several dignitaries. I believe that Senator Gallego will be there, and they'll probably, typically we have some members of Congress and others that come by as well, so I'm sure there will be. We can work to find that out and share with council, though.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Heredia. Thank you, Ms. Duff. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're done. Have a good rest of the day.